of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, September 19th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Noah Kulwin and Brendan James, hosts of the Blowback podcast on season 5 of their phenomenal show, which drops tomorrow. And later in the show, Ross Barkan will be with us to talk about all the trouble that Eric Adams is in right now. Also on the program today, Israel attacks Lebanon's civilian population again, this time with explosives in walkie-talkies. At least 20 dead, hundreds injured. The UN General Assembly votes overwhelmingly to demand Israel end its military presence in Gaza and the illegally occupied West Bank. Internal government watchdogs say they'll soon publish an investigation of Biden's weapons transfers to Israel. The uncommitted movement has announced that Harris has not yet done enough to secure their endorsement, but discourages third-party voting and emphasizing Trump's danger. The Teamsters have declined to endorse any candidate for president after meeting with Harris. Quinnipiac shows Harris expanding her lead in swing states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, although the New York Times has her tied nationally. And you know what might explain that? Kathy Hochul being down 20 points in favorability in the same Siena Times poll, Democrats bleeding support in safe states from the presidential level, but that spells bad things for the House. She's
again.
Again, yeah. The Fed is finally cutting rates after the European Central Bank has done so twice already, and inflation is at its lowest since the worst of the pandemic, so naturally Republicans say it's a conspiracy to help Biden. You know, Jerome Powell, the Trump appointee, Biden kept on. Russia is now gaining ground, seizing a town in eastern Ukraine after it had appeared that Ukraine was making some strategic gains. Andy Beshear bans conversion therapy in Kentucky. Good for him. And lastly, for the first time in decades, overdose deaths have dropped in the United States, in part due to Biden making naloxone available over the counter. Just gotta say, good job, Biden, on that. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's an EmMajority Report Thursday. I am back. Franklin Delano Disco says, for what reason other than racism or sexism would the Teamsters not endorse Harris when she was the tie-breaking vote in the Senate that saved $86 billion in Teamsters pensions? It's a rank and file
conversation.
Yeah.
Look, people would like to say, what about that benefits thing? There's also Teamsters that are upset about the previous use of the state's rail statutory powers to stop that strike. And that is something that I don't think we've had a full understanding of. I think there's, of course, there was some unions that said, yes, this was the right thing for the Biden administration to do. There was a lot that weren't. And also the Teamsters have a lot of different types of workers, to be say, like less college educated workers, and they're organizing them. People should go look back to what the Teamsters were doing when Nixon was president, which is like beating up anti-war protesters. Like, this is a process. I think Harris took the right tact, which is like, whether you endorse me or not, I'm going to act as if you did because the Republicans aren't there for you.
Yeah, right. And there's internal considerations that Sean O'Brien has with the rank and file that we just aren't privy to.
And I don't know if those are overstated or not, but to the extent that they are, like, he has to respond to them.
But I don't agree with,
No, it's false consciousness. I agree with that too.
Right, but it's also, just it's difficult for us to assess on the outside, not a member of that union. But let's talk about this because we're in deep trouble here, because Israel has now killed at least 20 people and wounded more than 450 in the second wave of explosions detonated in rigged walkie-talkies in Lebanon. This comes after they did so a day or two ago with pagers, and it's coming out that basically it was a Israeli front company in Budapest, I believe, that manufactured these rigged electronic devices in an effort to kill Hezbollah commanders, people in Hezbollah. But we should be clear that, like, Hezbollah functions as the government in many areas of Lebanon. They have civilian institutions that they're responsible for. It's, to just designate them as a terrorist organization is just not accurate.
Jeremy Scahill, Hamas and both, he includes Hamas here, which is
that's
also
just
true.
factually accurate.
Exactly. Well, this is how you have an adult conversation about these things, which our corporate press won't allow. But Hamas and Hezbollah are more than armed movements. They have civil institutions, schools, medical facilities, etc. In Gaza, Hamas is the government. In Lebanon, Hezbollah functions as one in many places.
Right.
Targeting civil employees as combatants is a lethal lie as terrorism. The idea that the idea that it was just Hezbollah that was holding these things, I think, is just absolutely implausible to me.
You're calling it terrorism, Matt, but let's be fair. It could also be very smart. The New York Times is framing it in an article this morning in this manner. Pager attack highlights tension between Israel's technical might, if we could show this, and strategic fog. Israel's technical might. Can you imagine if a Muslim majority country's military or militant group did this, detonated bombs in a coordinated manner across a variety of different civilian areas at the same time, killing dozens, injuring thousands, and the New York Times calling it some sort of display of technical might? You just see this is just racism. It's just racism. That's all this is.
This is like what Michael said, like if the shoe was on the other foot, like this is actually a demonstration of the massive imbalance in power here, because Hezbollah or Hamas or whoever is not going to be able to infiltrate the supply chain and replace your motherboards or lithium batteries with explosive devices. Only a colony that is backed up by the most powerful forces on earth will be able to do that. And
right.
What does Silicon Valley think about all this? Like their reputation.
What do you mean? They're providing surveillance.
But that's what I'm saying. All of a sudden, there's all those orders are going to China now. So maybe that's one thing that American companies should think about is like, oh, maybe like this idea that, oh, it's the scary Huawei or the scary Chinese companies. Well, maybe all of the stuff made over here could be bombs now.
Let's play this Al Jazeera report on what happened in Lebanon, because this is a country with people who just want to live in peace. And Israel committed a terrorist attack, probably using our intelligence, although Blinken is denying it, on the civilian population twice over the past few days.
Can we expect any good from Israel? Children are being killed. Their parents had small devices and they are detonated. Of course we're scared. My children, my siblings' children, all of us. Who can feel safe in the situation? We have 5,000 injured in just 2 days. This isn't a small matter. It's war.
I'm scared of my mobile phone. I carry it, but I'm afraid of it. This has become an international issue now. Israel and the US are behind these incidents, and we're the victims caught in the middle.
Ali Hashim reports from Tyre in southern Lebanon and how the latest attacks unfolded.
Grief turned to fear in a matter of seconds. Crowds had gathered for the funeral of a child and members of Hezbollah. when hundreds of mourners were surprised by an explosion. Hundreds of
Can you pause
communication
it for a sec?
devices.
I just want to clarify who that funeral was for. I believe that's the same funeral because I know that there was reporting that the bombs were going off in the midst of this funeral procession. If I'm wrong on this, I apologize. But this was a girl that was killed by one, again, look how sophisticated this is. Oh my gosh. Israel, what a display.
The precision we're hearing.
Precision.
Smartness.
10-year-old Fatima Abdullah.
Fatima was in the kitchen on Tuesday when a pager on the table began to beep. Her aunt said she picked up the device to bring it to her father and was holding it when it exploded, mangling her face and leaving the room covered in blood. She said Fatima was trying to take courses in English. Miss Musawi said she loved English.
Let's keep going.
Hundreds of communication devices burst simultaneously across Lebanon, killing several, injuring hundreds, among them civilians.
Yes, there are indeed many injuries, and today's incidents involved larger and bigger devices causing more damage. Therefore, the data might indicate an increase. We've observed a significant number of injuries. However, those who sustained serious injuries were severely affected, which raises our concern about a potential rise in the number of deaths.
It's the second wave of coordinated attacks on communication devices in the country in 2 days.
I did not expect what happened today. Things are repeating all over again. We had some devices here that we believed were 100% safe, but out of caution, we removed them from the store because we got worried. Our enemy is a traitor. May God give us peace. That's all we can say.
The Lebanese group did not comment on Wednesday's attacks, but blamed Israel for detonating hundreds of pagers the day before. Hezbollah officials called this a new phase in regional tensions and warned of reprisal.
They also, just hours ago, said this was an act of war. This is what Israel wanted to do. The first order of what they wanted to do was to make people terrified. Psychological warfare, to make everybody in Lebanon afraid of their phones, of their electronic devices, of their pagers, of other things in their home. A Knesset member said recently, over the past few weeks, they want to make a Beirut suburb look like Gaza. So these are explicit threats towards the people of Lebanon because Hezbollah has been explicit in their intention. They have been levying attacks in the north because of the genocide Israel is committing in Gaza. They say they will stop if Israel does not attempt to expand northward, which they're trying to do as we speak, and if the genocide in Gaza stops. They've been explicit. Same with the Houthis and their blockade in Yemen, and we have to have this whole conversation about how bad the character of the Houthis are.
Why do they hate us?
These are resistance organizations. These are resistance groups. These are heroes in the community because of what we're seeing. Can you imagine? Look at what we did after 9/11 when we were attacked in this city. I mean, it's not equivalent, but that's because there's a massive gulf and hypocrisy here in terms of the standards applied to poorer countries that we want to exploit and what U.S. empire gets to do. And of course, we're going to be having a conversation in just a moment with Brendan James and Noah Coleman of the Blowback podcast about what the United States did and wrought in Cambodia. But this is this is an attempt to goad Hezbollah into a larger response because they have been unable to do so. In Tehran, the Israeli government, in a similar manner, by the way, I think they had a bomb hidden, killed one of the people that they were negotiating with in Hamas, Hania.
One of the most pro-diplomacy representatives.
So that's but that was a provocation that Iran did not respond to.
Yep.
Right? The United States doesn't want a regional war, just from our own self-interests. I'm saying that with trepidation. I don't think the Biden administration does want that, given their stance towards Afghanistan. I think that's safe to say, but they're not willing to do what needs to be done to prevent it, because Israel desperately wants a broader regional war. Because there's no reality that we can return to after this genocide that they've committed, in which Israel is without continuing aggression. If it were to stop tomorrow, Israel's weakness would be exposed. So this is an attempt also to reestablish their deterrence capacity. It's not going to work long term, but you have these idiots in the United States and in Western press talking about this slaughter as if it's this technological achievement, and aiding the propaganda that Mossad is everywhere, and they're so you got to look out for Israel, and you better not cross Israel. What does it take? How many acts of aggression is this going to take for us to shift policy? It is absurd.
Yeah. Amended Protocol 2 of the Convention on Conventional Weapons. It is prohibited to use booby traps or other devices in the form of apparently harmless portable objects which are specifically designed and constructed to contain explosive material. Without prejudice to the provisions of Article 3, it is prohibited to use weapons, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is against the law. It's another thing that we're just ignoring.
Yep. Praying that diplomacy wins in this situation. That's all we can really say at this moment, and that this seems like there's nothing that's shifting Biden's policy as he leaves the White House, but obviously his legacy on foreign policy, for all the good stuff he did in terms of, yes, the Afghanistan withdrawal was a good thing that we did, but his foreign policy will be known for wreaking havoc and blood throughout a region that the United States was actually trying to get out of. But Netanyahu dog-walked him all over the place. With that said, here is a word from a few of our sponsors. Article believes in delightful design for every home, and thanks to their online-only model, they have some really delightful prices too. I'd seen advertisements for Article before, and I was like, wow, this is some really beautiful furniture. If I'm in the market for a new couch, I kind of am. I'm going with Article. Their curated assortment of mid-century modern, coastal, industrial, Scandi, and boho designs makes furniture shopping simple. Article's team of designers are all about finding the perfect balance between style, quality, and price. They're dedicated to thoughtful craftsmanship that stands the test of time, and it looks good as they're doing it. Article offers fast, affordable shipping across the United States and Canada, plus they won't leave you waiting around. You pick the delivery time, they'll send you updates every step of the way. Article's knowledgeable customer care team is there when you need to make sure that your experience is smooth and stress-free. Right now, Article is offering you $50 off your first purchase of $100 or more. To claim, visit article.com/majority, and the discount will be automatically applied at checkout. That's article.com/majority for $50 off your first purchase of $100 or more. Their furniture is really beautiful, so take us up on that if you're in the market for something new for your home or for your apartment. And lastly, ever wonder how much of your personal data there is out there on the internet for anyone to see? It's a lot more than you think. Your name, your contact info, even your social security number, home address, information about your family. It's all being compiled by data brokers and sold online. Over the last decade, the United States has witnessed steady growth in politically motivated, threatening online behavior, peaking around election cycles, as we've been seeing. A key enabler of the growth of personalized political attack ads online is the abundance of sensitive personal information that is available. Angry, politically polarized individuals are now able to find private personal details from data brokers on 98% of U.S. citizens. Delete Me research shows the volume of personal data on individuals available online has tripled between 2019 and 2023 to an average of over 525 pieces of personal information per person, available free for as little as $5 per profile. You can't always control whether you are a target, but you can make it harder for politically motivated threat actors to escalate threats by taking a proactive approach to the security of your personal information. That's why I personally recommend use and choose Delete Me. Like, I'm kind of prime candidate for this, and I've been using Delete Me since I joined the industry. Seriously, like, I think I was recommended to by someone at my old gig. And I'm glad that they're a sponsor here because I can personally say I think it does a great job. It's a subscription service that removes your personal info from hundreds of data brokers. Delete Me finds and removes any personal information that you don't want online, and makes sure it stays off. Delete Me is a subscription service. It removes your personal info and helps also protect from potential identity theft, doxing, phishing scams, etc. Sign up and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. Delete Me sends you regular personalized privacy reports showing what info they found, where they found it, and what they removed. And it's not just a one-time service. Delete Me is always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information that you do not want out there. To put it simply, Delete Me does all the hard work of wiping you and your family's personal information from data broker websites. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now a special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting MAJORITY to 64,000. Text MAJORITY to 64,000. That's a majority to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. All right, folks, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be with Noah Kulwin, and Brendan James. We are back, and I am thrilled to be joined by the hosts of the Blowback podcast, which is phenomenal, Noah Kulwin and Brendan James, and it comes out tomorrow, season 5. Check it out, folks. How are you guys doing, Noah and Brendan?
Pretty good. Excited.
Same tale of woe for me. I disagree with Noah.
So this season's on Cambodia. We had you guys on, I think, for your season 4, which was Afghanistan. You did the Iraq War, Cuba, the Cuban Revolution, the United States' involvement in Cuba, season 3, the Korean War, then Afghanistan, and now we're here, the story of Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, the United States' involvement. Either of you guys can take this, but why did you decide to talk about Cambodia? It's really not in the public's mind whatsoever, given the secrecy that the bombing campaign kind of operated under.
Well, we had often been asked to do a Vietnam season, and we will never acknowledge what fans want us to do ever, let alone do it. But of course, it was in our minds. But it's that's the one war that I don't think is dying, for a yet another treatment from some kind of American piece of media. However, the Cambodia story was a way into that whole conflict, because the Vietnam War really wasn't just the Vietnam War. It was this whole, we call it like a constellation of conflicts, where that was the initial catalyst. And so talking about, secret bombing raids and coups and assassinations, and then, of course, the sort of bait and switch of dealing with the Khmer Rouge to get back at other local enemies of America. That was all very attractive to us to get into, and might have things to say about, of course, the news cycle, today.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it occurs to me in Vietnam, right? The protests and I guess the cultural mythology behind it seems to be inextricably linked to Americans dying, right? And in the same way that when we talk about genocide and World War II, for example. The United States is diligent in portraying us as the moral actors that that stood up to Germany and was against the Holocaust, obviously, which flies in the face of the fact that, we turned away Jews that were fleeing, but now also that the Soviet Union lost like 20 million people fighting the Nazis, but we get to be the victors in that situation. It's so that in particular, I feel like, is informative in how the anti-communism mythology came to be post World War II and how U.S. empire spread its tentacles around the world in Vietnam, but then of course in Cambodia, where we carpet bombed an entire country. Noah, if you could just take it from there.
Sure. I mean, I think that the one thing that we were attracted to about the season, to build on something that Brendan said, not so much attracted to the atrocity, but seeing how this story brings together so many different elements of what we have talked about and who we've talked about in previous seasons. I think that we've gotten a really interesting cast of characters this season and sort of communicating the scope of that story that you're talking about, because it's not really possible without some really unique personalities, who are there to guide history on its path. Richard Nixon, also the erstwhile royal of Cambodia, or rather late royal, Sihanouk, and Henry Kissinger, of course, and the personalities of the Khmer Rouge themselves, whose definite, their distinct personalities are what produced the distinct tragedy of the Cambodian genocide.
And the characters that you describe here, if you could just flesh that out a bit, because, Kissinger and Cambodia are inextricably linked. But my understanding is that, LBJ was really they'd already begun bombing Cambodia under Lyndon B. Johnson. So what was that period that obviously Nixon and Kissinger built upon? If you could take us through that.
Yeah, I mean, there were sporadic bombings because the border was so porous between Cambodia and Vietnam. The Viet Cong began to use it. The Americans called it sanctuaries. It's not totally inaccurate. I mean, they were trying to cool off from the action that was going on in Vietnam. But generally speaking, aside from some special forces stuff and the Phoenix program crossing into Cambodia, it really was the invention of Nixon and Kissinger that took it to the concentrated effort to, bomb Cambodia and bring it fully into the war. Their argument was, of course, that we inherited all of this. And to a degree, that's true, although, they sabotaged the 1968 negotiations that were happening in order to win the election and promise the South Vietnamese regime a better deal. So it's a little bit of it's more than a little bit of a Nixonian and Kissingerian thing to say, oh, we inherited this even though we rigged it to keep going. But
and also, one thing I'll jump in to add quickly is that also bombing Cambodia, if you read newspapers from 1968 and you look at conservative and right wing and sort of military and intelligence community aligned news outlets, think tank types and activists, they talked very actively about bringing the war into Cambodia as a way of solving it. So when Nixon and Kissinger went about trying to end the Vietnam War by expanding it and attacking communist positions in Cambodia, it wasn't something that they had invented out of whole cloth. They were rummaging around in a right-wing policy toolkit that was screaming, that had like this big wrench in it that said bomb Cambodia. And that's how they just chose to go about it the way they did.
One general called it, basically when the wolves are closing in, you throw them a body, and that was Cambodia. So it was essentially, an expedient way to withdraw American troops, Vietnamize the war in Vietnam, make it into more of a proxy battle, and Cambodia paid the price for that.
And so the approach, how did that shift? You hinted at it a little bit, but when Nixon and Kissinger got into power, can you speak a little bit about that escalation and what their supposed strategic objectives were in Cambodia?
Sure. So when Nixon came into office, his main mandate was essentially to end the Vietnam War. And famously, he said that he would get peace, but he would get peace with honor. And that meant that the U.S. wasn't going to turn tail and run out of Vietnam, but as he sought to Vietnamize the war, to withdraw troops, rely more on South Vietnamese forces, and also, and this was less publicly discussed or at least bragged about, to just bomb and waylay with bombs and munitions what they believed to be communist areas of operations, but were just obviously huge swaths of countryside where civilians were living. And they thought, though, and they recognized that this idea, part of this is Nixon's natural predilection for secrecy, but they correctly believed that, well, Cambodia is a neutral country. So if we just start openly bombing Cambodia, then, that'll give the impression perhaps that we're at war with this neutral country that wants to be neutral. And while the head of Cambodia, Sihanouk, had ostensibly said like, oh, he knew about the bombing, supported it, he was kind of over a barrel. And I think the one sort of dimension I would to add, or the final piece of it to describe, is that Nixon and Kissinger then, after deciding that we needed to bomb Cambodia, it had to be in secret, they went about creating what was known as the false or dual reporting system, where they basically created an entirely separate set of books that they could use to run the Cambodian operations. They burned all the figures. They lied about it completely. It was run directly from the White House and through Kissinger to the highest levels of the military, to the actual airmen who were carrying out the operation and who were running, essentially, again, after they finished these bombing missions, which they first called Operation Breakfast and then Operation Menu as it went on for months, it was, again, to stress, entirely secret, and was actually the basis for, when it was revealed in part in a New York Times article, was the basis for the first Nixon witch hunt. So this Cambodia bombing was like the dirty secret of the Nixon administration in its first couple of years.
And can you guys just maybe do a little bit of myth busting about the nature of, say, like Soviet support in these areas? I mean, obviously we're thinking a lot about the genocide in Gaza and how Iranian-backed proxies is very much used as a propaganda tool in order to justify escalation. I think you could draw some real parallels to how the Soviet Union is portrayed in Vietnam, and then by extension, of course, Cambodia.
Definitely. In Vietnam, there's no doubt the Soviets were giving aid to the Vietnamese, both militarily and diplomatically. Support, was open. So did the Chinese. Although another interesting thing about this season of our show is that this is the height of the Sino-Soviet split that's happening. So China and the Soviet Union are at odds, almost more than the U.S. is at odds with either of them. And that factors into the story in a big way, because the U.S. and China will eventually meet at an embrace under the Nixon and Kissinger diplomacy. But the Soviet Union had nothing to do whatsoever with the Khmer Rouge. In fact, they were creeped out by them, and eventually...
Can you explain who the Khmer Rouge are, too, as well, for the audience that may need a bit of a primer on this?
For the Zoomers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the millennials and the Gen X and the Zoomers.
The Khmer Rouge, if the name Pol Pot rings a bell, the Khmer Rouge were a communist insurgency within Cambodia that originally was just kind of like an auxiliary force to the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong did most of the fighting in Cambodia. It was only till the very end of the war that the Khmer Rouge, which were the local communists, started to pick themselves up, and they claimed they were victorious in the civil war in Cambodia that our invasion kicked off. And they went on for the next 3.5 years to impose probably the most total sort of violent vision of like the parody of what communism in the Black Book of Communism could be. Some don't even argue it was communism because it was so detached from any kind of logical program, but forced labor all across the country, extermination of ethnic minorities, hence the Cambodian genocide, and just mass executions known as the killing fields. That was the immediate result of the end of the war in Cambodia that America had started. And then, as kind of the second half of our show, we move into what is often less discussed, which is the U.S. collaboration with the Khmer Rouge to strike at Vietnam once we had withdrawn from that country. So we became partners with the Khmer Rouge. We defended their seat at the UN. We sent them under a coalition. We sent them military and financial support. That is to say, the Soviet Union at the time was with Vietnam and the Eastern Bloc trying to unseat the Khmer Rouge after they had been driven from power by the Vietnamese, trying to completely stamp them out. And we were standing in the way. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was the guy who had organized the Mujahideen, was the same guy who was behind the Khmer Rouge policy. And
dad of Mika, who
of lovely
you may
Mika.
be familiar with from Morning Joe. So the Khmer Rouge, their rise in Cambodia. Can you give us a little bit of a timeline in terms of how the bombing campaign correlated with the Khmer Rouge, and then the United States' support for the Khmer Rouge? They committed mass genocide in the country of Cambodia too.
Yeah. So we're really talking about a specific period of, like 69 to 75, which is the sort of covering the rise of the Khmer Rouge beginning from the period of the bombings, because the bombings begin in 69 and they are not just an escalation in, horrible violence and tragedy for Cambodians, but it also becomes an escalation in policy that Nixon then makes explicit the following year with the announcement of an invasion of Cambodia. Now, this is an invasion of South Vietnamese troops going into southern Cambodia with the assistance and support of the American army. And the Cambodian invasion, which is preceded by a coup that removes Sihanouk and installs an American client dictator named Lon Nol, who is literally insane. He had a stroke. He was an unwell man. And like a Buddhist, just a strange, like Khmer supremacist, who preceded the Khmer Rouge. And so Lon Nol comes into power and he really runs this like rather shambolic state. And by dislodging Sihanouk from power, who then joined up with, as a symbolic leader, the Khmer Rouge, all of a sudden, the Khmer Rouge, this kind of, I don't want to say rinky-dink, but small and marginal compared to previous forms of Khmer insurgent struggle against Sihanouk, all of a sudden they are the most significant game in town. And they are supported very seriously by China. And at this time, before the end of the American War, or at least before, while South Vietnam is still around, they're also supported by Hanoi and North Vietnam, although that will eventually change. And so the Khmer Rouge are sort of this, like truly a wild card. Not much was known about them. They cultivated that about themselves. It wasn't just because like the people were ignorant. It was they actively sought the mystery and to play down their role in influencing the sort of broader movement that they positioned themselves as part of. And then, of course, they revealed themselves through their actions and publicly announced themselves a couple years in. But, the rise of the Khmer Rouge is essentially made possible because of American-supported machinations. That 1970 coup that installed the nutty guy Lon Nol, even if the CIA didn't necessarily plan it from Langley and organize it themselves, they were on board with it in however broadly you want to interpret that. And so I think that you can kind of sort of draw a straight line to, April 75, when the Khmer Rouge take over, to this, rising, amount of American interference and kind of, destruction of the Cambodian political order that was, what came after the beginning of the literal destruction of the Cambodian countryside.
And the value of the Khmer Rouge for Nixon, Kissinger, the CIA, etc. Is it just like they were going to keep slaughtering people in North Vietnam? That was part of it for them? Or was there also, there's propaganda value clearly in them labeling themselves as communists and can you talk about the inauthenticity of that and, the Soviets and how they viewed the Khmer Rouge, or expand even more on that point?
Yeah, so as Noah just laid out, that was everything up till they took over. The Americans were not allied with them during their time in power. They didn't really do anything to dislodge them, but they weren't allied with them. Although Kissinger did say, while they were in power privately, we'll make friends with them. The fact that they're murderous thugs we won't let that get in our way. So there was obviously going to be a shift, because already Vietnam had whipped America in the war. 75, America's out of that war, and Vietnam's unified again. And it was starting to look like the Khmer Rouge, this strange, isolated movement in Cambodia, would be a good blunt instrument against Vietnam, because Vietnam, another strain of our story in this season, is the attempt at normalization between Vietnam and America. And Nixon had promised them war reparations, which we never gave them. And so that they were really pushing for those war reparations, which would have been a whole year of GDP for them. Instead, what they got was increased attacks on their border from the Khmer Rouge, because Pol Pot, essentially things were going south. People unsurprisingly did not enjoy the killing fields, and they knew that they needed an external enemy in order to retain some legitimacy. And so that's when they started attacking Vietnam. Yeah.
To emphasize that like things were going really wrong and that Vietnam was the answer to that. Like, this was a country that had never known famine, that had never known, serious issues. But because they evacuated, the first thing the Khmer Rouge did was evacuate the capital city of Phnom Penh, which by that point was overstuffed with refugees from the countryside. You all of a sudden had all of these people who had, many of whom had no experience whatsoever in rural life, who are now essentially being forced to do like extremely draining and often, pointless, radical agricultural labor. And so, as you can imagine, when that society began to break down, there really, in the whole structure of that order began to break down within Cambodia. I'll let Brendan go back to it now, but that was this. It was, it's hard to understate just how much the violence against the Vietnamese like clearly grew out of and was exacerbated by like a catastrophic state of dysfunction that had been reached within like 18 months of being in power.
Yeah, this was the war after the war. Everyone knows the Vietnam War. What came after was the quote-unquote Third Indo-Chinese War, after the French, after the Americans. And that was the Khmer Rouge versus Vietnam. And Vietnam went in 78, December of 78, and said, we're getting rid of this Pol Pot guy. He's slaughtering our citizens across the border. He's slaughtering people inside of Cambodia. And Vietnam kicked out Pol Pot. And bafflingly, looking back on it today, this was met with international condemnation led by the United States. Because of Vietnam aggression. Imagine invading a country in Indochina and breaking their sovereignty. That's what the Americans said. And so they were punished. There was a famine looming because of Khmer Rouge policy, and America blocked food and humanitarian aid from going in to punish the now Vietnamese allied government that had replaced the Khmer Rouge. And that's when we do our Faustian bargain with the Khmer Rouge. They become an insurgency. And again, much like the Mujahideen, we say through Brzezinski that this is the blunt instrument we will use to attack Vietnam for the next 10 years while they occupy Cambodia. And that's when you get them literally being a part of U.S. policy until the early 90s, in which they are still carrying out, albeit as an insurgent force, the same kinds of policies they were always doing while they were in power. And Pol Pot, and by the way, Pol Pot traded his Mao jacket for safari suits and pastel colors and said, we need to follow the West now. We're not communists anymore. To your point, Emma, about the ultimate disposable utility of socialism. I think originally they did consider themselves socialists, but they were really more just xenophobic nationalists at the end of the day.
And there's a one other dimension of that sort of initial period when America in 80, 81, and then throughout the 80s is sort of standing with the Khmer Rouge insurgency and against Vietnam. Is that a couple months after Vietnam kicks out the Khmer Rouge, like we're talking like a matter of 7 to 8 weeks, it becomes clear, and then China follows through on its own in attack on Vietnam, which is mostly a symbolic strike. But the sort of purpose of it is to back up and sort of demonstrate to Vietnam that, like, listen, you may push the Khmer Rouge out of power, but you're still going to have like this, we're still going to be here supporting them against you. And we, like the Chinese leadership at that point, led by Deng Xiaoping, who sort of rather famously called the Vietnamese the hooligans of the East. They have a sort of long-standing geopolitical rivalry that exists outside of the Cold War world order.
He also called them the Cubans of the East, which is funny. Because the Cubans were allied with the Soviets, and the Chinese were like, "You think the Cubans are
things of the East? Can we call them?
I don't know."
But so China then attacks Vietnam, and it's it's like they retreat, and it's very damaging, and people take losses and what have you. But it's also to sort of illustrate that like what is also going on here is not just that we're teaming up with the Khmer Rouge to punish Vietnam, but that we are able to team up with the Khmer Rouge because we have these really good friends in the Chinese, and yes, other countries like Thailand. But the Chinese are the really important ones, and the Chinese will then become our friend. And it's also a story about the dawn of the kind of world order that is now ending, in which the Chinese and sort of Chinese manufacturing base and the rising, the Asian tiger economies were such an important part of global growth in the last 40 years. But now we are obviously seeing, the U.S.
retreating from that.
West, precisely.
Right.
Which sort
for
of
our
is,
own interests, capitalistly, obviously, because onshoring this kind of stuff just makes more sense for bottom line. And then, I mean, even our economic policy is framed in competition with China. That was in part what, we're still embroiled in the Middle East, but administrations for the past 2 decades have wanted to move towards a more militant policy towards China as like a sole focus.
The Asia pivot. And Obama's Asia pivot.
There's a real, to your point on reshoring, what this means, though, for these other, smaller countries in the region, Vietnam, Cambodia, Vietnam is actively seeking to absorb a lot of this manufacturing capacity from the West that's being taken out of China. They're appealing to European automakers and industrial powers, American automakers and industrial powers. And Cambodia, for what it's worth, is making a similar pitch, but it's also more aimed at the Chinese. And Vietnam, even though they're a historic rival of China, and they have ongoing, long-standing territorial disputes with China over famously the Spratly and Paracel Islands. You now have this situation where I think these countries, we're somewhat holding our breaths because a lot of it's dependent on how aggressive the U.S. wants to be, or at least that'll sort of be what lays out how powerful we really still are. But I think that it's, we are now seeing this era end in which we had built a world with China aligned against Vietnam and these other countries. And it's now settling into a more sort of generally ambiguous position where we're both freaked out that the Cambodians are allying with China, but also, we're not that freaked out because we have a lot of money invested in these places too. And we're, the head of Cambodia now went to West Point. It's a lot more complicated. It's not. Yeah,
it's much more. It's a new Cold War in a lot of ways, but it's so much more symbiotic than the relationship between the Eastern Bloc and the so-called free world was. There were actual blocks. That's gone now.
Well, there's no ideological. Well, it's all capitalistic at the end. It's like right? There's less of that fight. I think I would argue in this.
I mean, if some would say the Chinese are in the middle of their NEP that's just way longer than Lenin's, I mean, there's all kinds of ways you could slice it, but they're obviously using capitalistic, market mechanisms to build wealth. And whereas we have 750 bases all over the world, they have 2, one of which is in Cambodia, by the way. And they're obviously going for the wheel and deal method, which is far less violent but still quite threatening to the U.S. And
they brokered those talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
We talked about this last season. Is with Afghanistan, Beijing was far more involved at the end of the Afghanistan war that we started in bringing people together and talking about the future than the Americans were. And in the future, people are going to go to Beijing. They're not going to go to Washington for whatever, a handout or a mediator, and we can see that happening. So while Cambodia is now these days, not a hotspot, I suppose you would say, it is the site of the largest Belt and Road Initiative. And it is one of those places that's spelling out this larger conflict between China and America. And one last thing I'll say to make our season sound relevant and therefore mandatory to listen to is
it's already mandatory. Go on.
Thank you. It's just that you guys were talking about Lebanon. I mean, here's an example of, not to compare everything 1-to-1, but another country outside of the current zone of conflict being suckered in, and that was Cambodia. It did the best it possibly could to stay out of it. And we see Hezbollah, which is of course in the U.S. spoken of as like the most aggressive, irrational set of actors ever. They are mocked in some cases by the radical, minds on the struggle with Israel, because they don't want to get into it right now. Clearly, they do not want a large scale war, and they've been trying to avoid it up until now, at least. And that is the same kind of balancing act that Cambodia was facing during the events of this season.
And so
one other thing.
Go ahead, Noah. Yeah.
One other thing that sort of Brendan brought up, and this, we haven't actually brought this up yet, is that we went for the season. We traveled to Cambodia and Vietnam, and we conducted interviews, which will be in the season, and we can say more about in a minute. But one thing that we saw while we were there, so if you look at like a chart of economic growth in Cambodia, the before and after in the last generation is basically the economic crisis. When China and the sort of the Chinese boom lifted the world out of the Great Recession, Cambodia started to experience meaningful, like double-digit growth for the first time ever. You're talking about, one of the most reliably poor countries in Asia, not just Southeast Asia. And that's still, largely true to this day, but it's grown a lot. And to me, aside from seeing an Al Pacino as Serpico picture on a truck's mud flap, which is still like a fascinating, still can't quite get over that one. I remember we were, taking a motorbike in the outskirts of Phnom Penh, and you saw like a mall that had clearly been built with Chinese capital. And, it had been it was new, had a bunch of clearly Chinese stores on it for many of the Chinese tourists who do come to Phnom Penh and spend money on gambling. There are lots of casinos set up there. But what do we see in this Chinese mall? There's a drive-through Starbucks right there too. And so there is this, you can't, for how, to emphasize and re-emphasize what we've been saying, for as much as people want to make this a new Cold War, the degree of intertwinement, or, the degree to which like we are bound up in each other's shit, as like a world economy and society, like can't be understated, and is like, seems to sort of be, I mean, to me at least, is like it was something that I was struck by as a result of our travels there.
And so just to leave a lot of information for the podcast so people, check it out when it drops tomorrow. Overview, what are the final figures of both the bombing campaign and the genocide of the Khmer, that the Khmer Rouge committed, that is on the United States' hands here?
It's estimated that the bombing campaign was maybe around 100 to 150,000. It's obviously a much smaller country than Vietnam, in which the figures for that whole war were 2 to 3 million. The bombing campaign was around that. The Cambodian Civil War is estimated as up to 300,000, maybe 500,000. That's the whole conflict that was touched off by our invasion. The Khmer Rouge genocide, we spoke to the foremost expert on the Khmer Rouge genocide in the English language, Ben Kiernan, Australian scholar. And his numbers are 1.7 million Cambodians dead. The majority being Khmer, fellow Khmers, but the sort of genocidal extermination campaigns disproportionately being directed at the ethnic minorities of ethnic Vietnamese, Muslim Chams, ethnic Chinese, and so on. And taken together, it's obviously one of the great human catastrophes of the past 100 years.
Well, U.S.
Back
Empire.
to you, Emma.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's instructive because, slaughters of this nature, like, again, it's impossible to escape our current context. Like, genocides only count apparently in American culture when we can use them for propaganda value and not like what we have wrought. And like the level of generational trauma that the United States has inflicted upon the world, and impoverishment and disease. I mean, people need to know, so they can listen to both this season that's coming out tomorrow of Blowback to learn about Cambodia, but then of course what we did in Iraq, the Cuban Revolution, the Korean War, Afghanistan. The numbers keep ticking up, and you could check out those previous seasons as well. It's packed with information and so well researched. Really appreciate your time today, guys.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay, for sure. And we'll put a link obviously to Blowback in the description wherever you're listening to or watching this. Or watching it. Was that the right way to construct a sentence?
You did it well, yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you. I know how to speak.
Listening or watching, I think those are the two main ways that we're trying to get through the sense of feel. Live streaming Braille has not been figured out yet, but yeah.
Okay, soon enough. All right, folks, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking with Ross Barkan. are back, and we are joined now by Ross Barkan, contributing writer for The Nation, who also writes a column on national politics for The Guardian, contributing writer at New York Magazine. And his latest piece for The Nation is entitled, Is Eric Adams' Luck About to Run Out? Ross, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Great to be on.
So, can you just summarize the chaos of Adams's first 3 years in office for people who may not be in New York or New York City or aware of this?
Yeah, lots to summarize. So first, you have the current federal investigations. There are 4. They all concern different matters. One, which forced the police commissioner to resign, related to his twin brother running a consulting firm of some sort that was advising restaurants and nightclubs on how to deal with the NYPD if they had fines or complaints or things like that, and the firm was taking a fee, and in return, the twin brother of the police commissioner would say he would, take care of things. So there's no indictments from any of these, but it sort of seems like a classic quid pro quo. There's another investigation related to Eric Adams' possible ties to the Turkish government, which is a very odd one, and taking money in his 2021 campaign from
and then appearing in some random Turkish film as well, taking multiple trips to Turkey.
Yes, he goes to Turkey. Yes, he's taken trips to Turkey. There's another investigation related to his ties to China, which is also strange, and then yet another one tied to the one of his close allies, this guy Tim Pearson, who also has his own firm that seems to be engaging in some really dubious behavior with city contracts. So I would say the overall theme is incompetence and petty corruption. I would specify no indictments have come yet. Adams himself, it's not clear if he will be indicted, if he's a target. No sitting mayor of New York City has ever been indicted, but there's a first time for everything. What I would say is even beyond the corruption cloud, which is very thick and the thickest I've seen around a mayor in my lifetime, and other mayors, including Bill de Blasio, have faced investigations. Nothing came of them. Beyond the thick corruption clouds, there's this general inability to get things done, a real incompetence and slowness to the government that really began under Adams, because in my view, he doesn't take governing very seriously. He has a lot of patronage hires in his government. It's a bit like the old line Tammany Hall, but without the delivery side of things. This isn't a political machine that is getting people public goods, but also stealing. This is more potential stealing, potential quid pro quo, appearances of corruption, and incompetency, and little in the way of delivery. So there's a real fatigue among a lot of New Yorkers with Eric Adams. And I do think he is going to have a hard time winning a second term. And that is rare. Most New York City mayors win their second term.
That is rare, but within the state of New York, Bradley, can we put up this tear sheet of Democrats are not doing well? I mean, this is broadening the conversation to the presidential election, but people are wondering why, because the previous kind of rule of thumb is that Democrats have to be winning the popular vote or up by 3 points for them to have a chance in the Electoral College, but most polls have her kind of tied nationally with Trump, and you can draw a line to Kathy Hochul and New York Democrats in big blue states. So you could just see that Kathy Hochul is 20 points underwater in New York State, and that's going to take away from Harris's national vote totals, it seems to me, because in these blue states, specifically New York, though, Democrats are cratering in popularity, and it affected the House races in 2022, and it's going to affect the House races in 2024 as well. And it's just, Ross, if you could just talk a little bit about even his relationship with Hochul as well, and how Democrats have sprinted towards this tough on crime thing, while all the while there's all this corruption going on, and I mean, the consulting firm where the twin is paying for advice on how to deal with the NYPD. It's just like a formalized version of cops going and shaking down business owners to protect their business, was happening all the time in New York in the 70s and 80s and things like that.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt it's a lot of an alleged brazen shakedown scheme, and we'll kind of see where the investigations go on that. But it certainly doesn't look good for the former police commissioner now who resigned. So perhaps he may fear an indictment soon. We shall see. Speaking to the Democratic picture, I think a few things are interesting. A Siena poll just came out that showed Harris, I think, what was she at? Like 50, she was 50 something percent over Trump, maybe like plus 12 points, something like that. I have to double check. It was better than what Biden was running in the spring, but it's way behind what Biden actually did in 2020, where he broke 60% in New York. So it's really interesting that Kamala Harris, even with all the joy and all the excitement and Brett Summer, is still not running at 60% in New York State. So that's really interesting. That could bode poorly for the down ballot. We'll see. My sense is that the House Democratic candidates will probably perform better than 2022. 2022 was a remarkably bad cycle for Democrats in New York. You had concerns about high crime really permeating the races. Hochul ran a very bad campaign for governor, almost lost to Lee Zeldin, a Trump Republican, and that really damaged the candidates down the ticket. She actually has been very involved in Democratic politics since then, building up the state Democratic Party, which was non-existent and was cannibalized by Andrew Cuomo. I think to her credit, she's really tried to make it a functioning political organization, and is the first governor to really do that, certainly in modern times. At the same time, she's not popular. She's not a good politician. There is this interesting power vacuum in New York where you have a mayor who is quite, at least has the appearances of corruption. And you could argue, looking at his decades of government, is corrupt. He has had corruption allegations swirl around him since he was a state senator. Eric Adams is extremely unpopular. He actually has a good relationship with the governor, which is also interesting. One of the few politicians who still really takes his calls and deals with him is the governor. Most other locally are against or indifferent to Adams at this point. So he's struggling, and she's struggling too. She certainly has been poor at courting, moderates and even conservatives, though she herself has campaigned as a moderate, campaigned as someone who's been weakening the bail, weakening bail reform laws and really trying to tack to the center as much as possible. Hasn't really paid dividends with the moderates. At the same time, the left dislikes her, though she's less an enemy of the left than Cuomo was, but certainly she's not a friend of the progressive left. So she's caught in this funny ground where Republicans hate her, moderates are skeptical, the left dislikes her. That's how you get a really bad favorability rating. She's not corrupt, unlike Adams. She's not had any allegation of corruption kind of swirling around her. There's no investigation into her. Remember Andrew Cuomo, before all the sexual harassment stuff, his top aide, Joe Prococo, was indicted. So Hochul has kept it clean, but it is a strange era we're in right now, where the top Democrats in New York, the mayor and the governor, are not terribly popular. And they're the ones who are in people's faces the most. I would say Chuck Schumer certainly is maybe the most famous, but he's really a DC creature. Certainly he comes around New York, but really when locals are thinking about their government, they're thinking about the mayor and they're thinking about the governor, and that's kind of where their ire is aimed at right now.
And in terms of also his relationship with the NYPD, could you talk a little bit about that? Because obviously there was a shooting on the subway recently. Apparently the police pursued this guy who skipped a turnstile and didn't pay the $2.90 that the subway fare requires, and so I guess like shooting 4 people makes total sense in the midst of a crowded subway station. By the way, subway murders, for all of the coverage the New York Post gives it, single digits in terms of those figures last year, I believe. So like Eric Adams came into power, right, in response, like he appeared like he could be a reformer because that's previously how he was, but at the end of the day, he ran more towards like anti-defund the police stuff, pro-cop, all that. And it was perceived by the national press as like, see, here you go. People don't want police reform. This is a good example of a Democrat who ran and won. And at the end of the day, that had no staying power. And if you could just talk a little bit about how he even got to this point, because he had corruption issues in that race too, or weird stories like why does he live in New Jersey and why is he lying about his address, that kind of thing.
So the 2020 and 2021 mayoral primary was a very interesting one. It was the first ever ranked choice voting primary. So a voter could choose up to 5 candidates in the race and actually rank them, which had never happened before. It was held in the middle of the pandemic. So it was only a year after tens of thousands of people were killed by COVID in New York City. Concerns about crime were very real. Crime was rising at the time. It no longer is, but you saw a real spike in shootings and murders in that period after really a long-term decline beginning in the 1990s and continuing on into the end of the 2010s. So that between COVID and crime, it certainly destabilized a lot of and worried a lot of people, destabilized society to a degree. Eric Adams, though he had a very checkered state Senate career and a borough presidency that also had its fair share of scandal, never really rose to the level of major headlines. He was never indicted or anything like that. He really was the right fit for that race, in that it was a race that turned on law and order and law enforcement experience, and he had it as a former police captain. He was also and is a product of the Black working class in New York City. So he combined these unique features of being someone who came out of the NYPD, also had been something of a rabble-rouser and reformer within the NYPD at the time, so he could speak that language to a degree. At the same time, it was far easier for him to talk about law and order than an Andrew Yang or someone like that, because he had that credibility of having carried a gun and walked the streets. He could talk that language. A lot of the scrutiny in the race came for Yang and not for him. I think Yang, in retrospect, kind of unwittingly served as the shield for a lot of the left's ire and a lot of their obsessions. And so he also ran as a moderate, though certainly not someone with the same pedigree or background as Adams. And so Yang collapsed, and then Scott Stringer was also sort of the leading left candidate. He had a sexual harassment scandal. He collapsed. Catherine Garcia, also running as a moderate, she rose, but she kind of rose from nowhere to almost win, and she came within 10,000 votes of beating Adams, but Adams kind of just had enough. It was kind of a perfect storm of various factors that brought him to City Hall. And a lot of the negative stories about him came very late in the race. So the scandal about his possible residency in New Jersey, strange tax issues, it was very late breaking. It was the final few weeks. It didn't really come early enough to define him enough in the view, I think, of a lot of voters who are willing to rank him, seeing him as the serious guy about crime who's going to get the city back on track from COVID. So all that comes together. He wins. He doesn't win by a lot, and he comes into office, is initially fairly popular if you look at very early polls, but I think very quickly squanders that. And in part because he had no grand ideas. We were talking about policing, for example. De Blasio came in on this promise to reform the NYPD, did not quite succeed, but, had some concepts, and he did reduce stop and frisk. Adams, meanwhile, doesn't really have a grand vision for governing, doesn't care too much.
Well, I mean, he does have the Rat King situation. Or no,
he's the rats. He does.
His only initiatives have been going after rats and trash cans, and he doesn't, as you're saying, he has no interest in governing, and it's almost lazy to describe him as a Trump type, but there's no other way for me to describe him in the sense that he's
Trump.
not interested.
There overlap between him and Trump for sure. I've written that before.
Right, yeah. He says whatever he needs to say based on whoever is in the room, and then he forgets it, and then he's kind of clownish in public, so you're amused by him, but there's no there. And housing has still exploded in the city in terms of prices. the over policing of the subways, it does not, like, people are not thrilled with it, and we're seeing exactly what it wrought. So there was no agenda, and what there was, and then there was just really corruption, and the two agenda items were kind of just like PR exercises, the trash can thing and the rats attack thing.
I would say for Adams, and in his defense, I'll say he's not completely devoid of policy accomplishments. I think there's some interesting things happening on the rezoning front in New York City and building more housing. I think he has sort of fought some of what I would call, the sort of the staunch NIMBY agenda, though Adams himself is not pro-tenant at all. He is very much aligned to the real estate industry, but I think he is trying to get a more equitable construction of housing across the city, which is something like Bloomberg never did. But yes, overall, his accomplishments at best are small bore. The big picture thing he could run on if he were more competent would be the crime decline. Crime has declined nationwide. I wouldn't attribute it to anything in particular Adams has done. I would say that about any mayor. I don't think one mayor can magically wave a wand and make crime go down. But he could run around and say, look, subway crime's down, shootings are down, murders are down, I did it. And that is a winning formula. But he has the corruption scandals, he has his own incompetencies, inability to focus, kind of like Trump. There's a bit of demagoguery to Eric Adams as well. So he can't quite benefit from what should be a trend line in his favor. And I think, and the subway issue, I'll address the subway issue too, both Hochul and Adams really fear-mongered around crime in the subway. I don't want to downplay subway deaths and subway crimes and hate crimes. I mean, they are real issues, and there is something to be said about having a police presence in the subway. I don't think you can say the absence of one is a wonderful idea. But at the same time, Hochul was dispatching National Guard troops for no good reason into the subway earlier in the year. You have these instances where both Hochul and Adams are very, very concerned about fare evasion. Yes, fare evasion is an issue. At the same time, it's the sort of thing, if the MTA was better at spending money and more competent, they would put in new gates and sort of better ways to prevent people from jumping turnstiles, as they have in Europe or Asia. If you go to other metro systems, it is hard to actually evade the fare.
Well, those improvements were supposed to be paid for by the congestion pricing thing that Hochul torpedoed.
So, and then of course, congestion pricing, which Hochul put on pause and might come back. And it was one of those maneuvers that was in theory popular statewide, but hasn't added to her popularity, though I think Hakeem Jeffries might feel it's going to help the House Democratic candidates running in the suburbs of New York City. We'll see. But just putting aside the politics of it, pausing congestion pricing was a terrible policy decision because, yes, as you said, it was going to fund a lot of capital improvements that now are on hold. And there are a lot of upgrades that the subway system desperately needs that congestion pricing is going to pay for. Perhaps it still will in the near future. We're going to see. But as of now, it is sort of like financial chaos for the MTA, this big black hole, and they don't quite know how they will fill it. So you've got a lot of factors here, right? And so you get to this incident, this terrible incident with a cop chasing a mentally ill guy, it appears, who didn't pay the fare, which it shouldn't be something you get shot at for. And I think there's sort of a few factors, right, coming into this. One is the number of mentally ill on the streets of New York City and the lack of services for them, the lack of housing for them, the lack of facilities for them, the lack of mental health facilities, hospitals. This is not Adams' fault necessarily, but certainly this is not the administration to go in and try to fix it. They don't have the wherewithal to do it. You've got, poorly trained police relative to at least police in other countries, well trained by American standards, but not by, I would say, like German standards or something like that. These police tend to be young. They tend to be inexperienced. They give them a gun and then they set them loose. And so you get, really crazy incidents like these where someone is opening fire in a subway station. So it's very tragic. It's sort of one more, I think, strike against the Adams NYPD. And I do think you add it all up, right? Adams has had the lowest approval rating in a Quinnipiac poll of any New York City mayor since the 1990s, since they started polling. You bring it all together, and you see a mayor who's really endangered. Unlike Trump, who's kind of survived all this scandal and built this cult within the Republican Party, Eric Adams has no cult within the Democratic Party. He's got a base, he's got a working class base, but he's not popular enough necessarily to just power through all of this. And I do think if indictments come in these various scandals, if people close to him are indicted, if his ex-police commissioner gets indicted, he is in deep, deep trouble politically, even if he never ends up in prison or anything like that.
Ross Barkan, contributing writer for The Nation. The piece is entitled, "Is Eric Adams' Luck About to Run Out?" Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Ross. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program, head into the fun half, where the number is 646-257-3920. We rely on your support, everybody, to make this show possible. Join themajorityreport.com, please.
Yeah, we keep getting banned on TikTok. Sorry for anybody who was trying to watch on that.
Maybe because I don't know, did I say genocide like
No.
17 times?
They have weird. First, somebody reported us for something, and now it's for reproduced content.
What?
But again, like the things that we reproduce here are reproduced to commentate on. But anyway.
Oh, we have Brandon. That's probably.
I gotta get them.
That's true.
Why is Brandon?
You'll be a disembodied voice for just 1 second, Brandon. In the meantime,
I don't even know if we can hear him though.
We can't even hear you. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
There we go. Okay, now we can.
Now we can hear you. Hey.
Hello.
The man behind the curtain.
Man
What's happening
behind the
over
curtain.
on the discourse?
I'm a little behind in my editing this week, but we should have some episodes out for you next week. I don't know what they will be on, but we have a little bit of a backlog right now. So stay tuned. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter, not X, but Twitter at Pretty Bad Lefty, so you know when they come out, though, as always.
Matt Binder, hello. You are muted.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. What's happening on your shows?
Yeah, so on the stream this week, just did a call-in show, update everyone with, because I didn't do one last week because of the debate. So took a bunch of calls to make up for it this week. And
that was last week.
Yeah.
That was last.
It feels like 100 years ago.
It literally feels like 100 years ago. Yes.
We've already had 3 more attempts on our beautiful president's life in that time.
And
time goes by fast and slow. Yeah.
People care even less this time. Okay, but sorry, Binder, go on.
No, it's just the Collins. Check it out.
Check it out.
YouTube.com/Matt Binder. Talked about a lot of topics all over the place, all over the world too.
Beautiful. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Oh yeah, Left Reckoning. Check out Left Reckoning.
Oh, and ESPN. We're doing our picks today, and we're being brief. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back. It is the fun half, everybody. Ayn Rand, Paul Ryan says, no Emma halftime song, inexcusable. My disappointment is immeasurable and my day is ruined.
Yeah, well, next week.
Next week. You can go back to other fun halves and listen to it if you need to get your fix.
We played it the whole week. Sam was out last time. So.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Oh.
So,
I like how they called it the halftime song.
Exactly.
yeah, me too. Pandemic Anxiety says Lowell, Massachusetts has the first Cambodian mayor of any U.S. city, largely from the large asylum population here. And Lowell has got good food, art, and workers. Asylum seekers make the best citizens when they are welcomed. It's absolutely true.
Rare Massachusetts W.
Totally. Shrimp-O-Maniac says, apparently there's an imminent story about Mark Robinson in North Carolina regarding, quote, activities on adult websites in the 2000s. He's being pressured to withdraw from that race. All of this according to the Carolina Journal. I'm interested in that. Can we pull up that old sermon that he heard about that. Yeah,
I did too.
Apparently, there's a story dropping about Mark Robinson, who is kind of like single-handedly dragging down Republicans' chances in North Carolina. I mean, I think Kamala Harris is going to win North Carolina, in part because of how insane this dude is. The Republican nominee, Trump-endorsed guy, this was unearthed by, I think, the Huffington Post, a sermon of his from 2 years ago on birth control.
You see, in this age of information, we use a lot of that information. One of the things we love to tell our young men and women is, we want to empower you so that you can be strong in society. Particularly, we love to tell our young women that. We want to empower you. We want to help you to build up your mind so you can be empowered. Here's a novel idea. Why don't you use some of that building up of your mind and building up of empowerment to move down here to this region down here?
Oh.
And get this under control. See, because this region right here, that's the only region on your body that can make life and take life.
What?
Because anything we need to be telling our young people is they need to be responsible with their reproductive systems. That means you don't lay down and act like you're making a baby till you're ready to have a baby. All this giving out of birth control and advising people how to, well, you see, if you do it this way, you won't have a baby. If you do it that way, Here's how you don't have a baby. You don't have what you do to make a baby till you're ready to have that baby. You be responsible with your body. That's a novel ideal. Has not reached our school system, sadly.
All right, so
what?
That's him saying that.
What's the take a life thing?
I don't know how your genitalia can take a life. I mean, I guess if the sex is that good, but I don't really know.
Well, you see, in French, they call the orgasm le petit mort, and so he's making a very deep cut.
He's so cultured.
Implicit French idiom reference there, I'm sure.
I don't like when pastors go off script. I think you should stick to reading the Bible, not to tell someone how to do their job. I don't like these little off script rants.
Is he actually a pastor? That's the one thing that I'm not like. He just decided
He just
to get
walked
up
into
there.
the church. Yeah, he just walked up into the church and was like, you know what? It's my time.
Because he's done sermons before where he said controversial things, including like the Charlotte Observer reported this in 2021 because he was lieutenant governor. He was at a church and he made, so this must have been in his capacity as lieutenant governor. It doesn't really matter. But he had gone to a church and said that, heterosexual couples are superior to gay couples. He didn't understand the purpose of being gay.
Yeah, he's a pastor in the Church of Rush Limbaugh.
I just assumed that he was a pastor because he do the pastor cadence. He's doing the,
right,
the make a life, take a life thing. Like he's speaking pastorally.
Yeah.
And a lot of these unearthed videos are him just speaking in front of what seem to be broadly empty churches. It's kind of a quiet din of people listening to him while he leers around the altar of the church.
So I mean,
he's getting some positive feedback.
Yeah, right. Like this,
genitals do kill people for sure.
For sure, he's probably referring to like disease, but either way, it's just. I mean, what century are we in? No birth control because you gotta the control you have to worry about is controlling your genitalia. He's asking people not to have sex before they have the ability to have children. It's super realistic. Great policy. But this is the guy, he has shared very anti-Semitic content on his Facebook page. He is a QAnon believer kind of guy. I don't know what's going to take this guy down if these reports that people are hinting at must be pretty bad if we already have a lot of bad stuff out there about him.
Just regarding that clip, though, I just want to say, just how weird how he's harping on his quote unquote novel idea. I mean, as a teen, all you learn about sex is about having safe sex and either not having it or being safe about it. This is by far not a novel idea when you're young.
It's really not. It's actually the exact opposite of novel because it's been said by religious conservatives for many, many lifetimes.
Right, they dig it in your head, whether you go to public school or private school, if it's a religion-based teaching or not a religion-based teaching, they just wherever you are, it's about safe sex when you're young. So I don't know what this guy's talking about.
A certain type of religious freak gets off on talking about sex in church in a moralistic way. I've heard it. I remember being at teen mass in North Dakota, and the way that one of the sort of young youth pastors was talking about blowjobs was, I just think, fucking weird. But sources say with direct knowledge have spoken with Carolina Journal on the condition of anonymity and say that Robinson is under pressure from staff and members of the Trump campaign to withdraw from the governor's race due to the nature of the story, which they say involves activity on adult websites in the 2000s. According to sources, Robinson has resisted withdrawing and privately denies the story. I don't know what this is.
So he's got to get control of this a little bit.
Right. Whether he was just commenting on maybe certain videos that would be embarrassing to comment on, or he was in videos himself. I'm going to suggest that this sort of stuff has always been known about Mark Robinson by certain people within the Republican Party and was used to control him. And that's what it's being used to do now, because it's clear that he's a loser. And so they're going right up to the deadline, but now they're trying to pull that plug that they've always had on that guy. And now they're just making it actionable. That's my prediction of what's going on behind the scenes.
Well, I think, like Emma said, a lot of the stuff is known. Like the stuff that we already know about him, his defending violence against women, his general anti-Semitic comments, that's bad for us. So I have to assume that the pornography he was watching was something that would be bad to Republicans. So I have to assume he was watching like gay porn or like, you know, porn that includes trans people or something that they can't overlook.
Yeah. It is interesting, like Matt, you've said this before, that we underestimate the ability, like how blackmail functions in these circles and in society like that. And I think that's accurate. I mean, there's a lot of these guys on the right. Matt Schlapp comes to mind.
Exactly. A liability can very easily be an asset if it's delivered in the right way that a certain person can decide whether they want to play it or not.
That would actually, that's a great like little sermon he should do, Emma. Like you reminded me with like the black male. He should be like, and let me tell you, church, I'm a black male, but I will not be blackmailed. I will not be blackmailed for my taste in pornography.
And so what if I left him in the river and swam away from the car? What of it?
Yeah, I guess. Man,
paternity tests are not always completely accurate.
The love a man has with himself in the darkness of his office is between him and God.
And the porn theater in Greensboro, North Carolina. But that's a completely different story.
I need to know what these allegations are. We shall know soon enough.
All these completely alleged. I'm just making jokes.
Yes,
completely speculative. I'm not.
Thank you for protecting us.
I have no intel on this at all.
I don't imagine that we can guess. It's a shock for all of us. Who can?
It'll be fun. It's a little treat that we get to have. Another right-wing politician that you guys may have heard of is J.D. Vance. So we haven't really gotten a chance, I feel like, to talk about, as the Thursday crew, the extremely racist conspiracy theories that Trump and the Republicans are pushing. Because, it's been a week since the debate. We were laughing. It feels like it's been a million years already, but when Trump went up on stage and said they're eating cats, they're eating dogs, it's a funny meme, but at the end of the day, it's prompted extreme threats to the people of Springfield. There have been bomb threats, school closures. The Haitian migrants there are not having their kids go outside and play. And let's be clear, they are here legally under temporary protected status. Not that it should matter, but it doesn't matter to J.D. Vance. Here he is at a rally being asked explicitly about the fact that these immigrants here are here under a legal status. And he just says it explicitly. It does not matter to him. Giving away the game. They're going to continue to call them illegal.
Hi, Senator. Mia McCarthy with Politico. Question for you about the Haitian migrants in Springfield. So I know you've talked a lot about how we need to deport illegal aliens, but I wanted to ask you, the majority of the Haitians in Springfield came under TPS, so they are here legally. And I know you've expressed a lot of your issues with the TPS program and wanting to change that under a Trump-Vance administration. But I guess my question for you is, if you become the vice president under a Trump administration, what will you guys do about the migrants that are already there, since they did arrive legally? And a follow-up to that, if you plan to deport them, how would you do that legally?
Well, look, this is a media and Kamala Harris fact check that I want to clarify and clear up right now. And here's now, the media loves to say that the Haitian migrants, hundreds of thousands of them, by the way, 20,000 in Springfield, but hundreds of thousands of them all across our country, they are here legally. And what they mean is that Kamala Harris used two separate programs. mass parole and temporary protective status. She used two programs to wave a wand and to say, we're not going to deport those people here. Well, if Kamala Harris waves the wand illegally and says these people are now here legally, I'm still going to call them an illegal alien. An illegal action from Kamala Harris does not make an alien legal. That is not how this works.
I'm trying to figure out how Mike's work.
So temporary protected status is a program that's been in place since the 90s. In this country, it's somewhere from, 600,000 people who hold temporary protected status. It gives these immigrants the ability to reapply and maybe even apply for citizenship. I think it's up in 2026. This is by no means illegal. It has been in place across both Republican and Democratic administrations. So what he's saying there is that no level of immigration from certain kinds of people is acceptable or legal under his standards. And that's really giving away the game there, because at the end of the day, this whole attempt to basically incite stochastic terrorism or a pogrom against these immigrant communities in this country, what it boils down to is just like, they're black, and they're Haitian, and Haiti led the most successful slave revolt, and there's all this like pent up like white nationalist Nazi resentment towards that, and so we're going to target them anyway, because at the end of the day, this is all about hatred and not some sort of legal status.
I do think that just based on his physical reaction to being asked the question, you could see him touching his face, like trying to mop the flop sweat off. I do think that he personally feels like Trump bringing this conspiracy theory to the forefront of the media's attention at the debate stage has kind of forced him into a corner to have to find ways to defend this, which he definitely does feel this way about Haitian immigrants broadly. But I think he would much rather be making these kinds of arguments about them being illegal immigrants here despite not being illegal without the umbrella of these cats and dogs story, because that's just like unequivocally racistly false, and there's no real defense for it. So he just kind of keeps having to make these tangential arguments about it and draw away from the fact that he was just last week caught spreading like a racist urban legend. And so I do think some of this, like, you can see him like grasping at straws, and I think he has settled on this one for like how he can pivot from talking about like, oh, why were you saying that in reality the person leaving the hook on the door of the two lovers on Lover's Lane was actually Haitian last week. This is his way of getting away from that and starting to like bring it back to a more general GOP talking point about anti-immigration. So I do still feel like he should be hammered on the core of that story, because that's what people are really, drastically turned off by, because it's so racist.
Right.
Not these like little points about like, they're not technically citizens because they just Kamala making illegals legal with some like stroke of a pen stuff. That's not why people are mad. People are mad because you were saying the other thing.
Yeah.
I would like to ask people to ask themselves why J.D. Vance is covering up crimes of the Clinton State Department and Foundation.
Yep.
Because Haitians is one word for them. Victims of the Clintons is another. You can look back at WikiLeaks published a cable from the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton's State Department. There was going to be a minimum wage of trying to get it up to like 50 cents or something like that. This infuriated American corporations like Haynes and Levi Strauss that pay Haitians slave wages to sew their clothes. They said that they would only fork over a 7-cent an hour increase, and they got the State Department, Hillary Clinton, involved. The U.S. ambassador put pressure on Haiti's president, who duly carved out a $3 a day minimum wage for textile companies. The U.S. minimum wage, okay, $3, sorry, whatever.
Also,
the U.S. minimum wage, itself very low, works out to about $58 a day. Haiti has about so we're talking about jobs. where are the jobs going? Maybe our State Department should stop suppressing wages in other countries so that Levi's can be there. Haiti has about 25,000 garment workers. If you paid each of them $2 a day more, it would cost their employees $50,000 per working day, or about $12.5 million a year. As of last year, Hanes had 3,200 Haitians making T-shirts. So again, like, can we talk about this stuff, JD, if we're going to be actually critical about the uniparty and all that stuff? No, it's because actually he's doing the Hitler play, which is the failures of capitalism, whether that's housing or whatever, lack of jobs, we're going to blame that on some other.
Yeah, and to Brandon's point earlier, I just want to say, like, JD Vance is, yes, he's cleaning up Trump, because even though they do believe this, Trump wasn't supposed to say this in the general election. This is for Truth Social, this is for the rallies, and this is for the rallies particularly in a campaign that's functional in the primary season. Trump was supposed to be pivoting towards the general election, and he made his strongest issue on polling, which is immigration, into a meme where people are mocking him, and then, like, generally people who are just like, maybe they have racist views on immigration, but they're more moderate politically, can see this as for what it is, which is explicitly racist. And then you have like business owners coming out and saying they're great employees, which is all that matters apparently in society. But like, it was so explicit that JD Vance is just doing cleanup, but it's for an audience of one, for me at least, to see this. Because like, why is Trump deploying this dude all the time? He has a historically low favorability rating for a vice presidential pick. Like, Sarah Palin eventually got there, but he started out in the basement, double-digit net negative for his favorability. He's on every Sunday talk show. He's doing all these solo rallies. It's like Trump thinks he's doing a good job. And it's like he was always a ratings guy before this. So I don't know if he's so far down the rabbit hole and diluted and he thinks that, okay, the numbers are all fake now, or he just really does enjoy getting Vance to go out there and explain away the most insane shit that Trump says.
Well, to be fair, to your point, Emma, we don't know what numbers Trump sees, to be fair. Like, just to think about it. We know that he lives in an echo chamber because he picked JD Vance. And even before he picked JD Vance, anyone, if he watched this show, he would have known not to pick JD Vance before he picked JD Vance. So yeah, it's hard to know what he knows at any given point in time, not just because he is Trump, but also because he's fed a constant stream of BS. I will say, though, to your earlier point, I think it's also important to highlight that this anti-Haitian rhetoric is just a vehicle for being anti-Black, just broadly speaking. And why JD Vance's statement is also important, not just because what he's saying now is what Trump was supposed to be saying on a debate stage, not just the underlying or like sort of the racist urban legend, is that he's basically saying that Black people are un-American by, nature of being Black. Like, there is a certain type of real American, and that's coded as like white, Christian, heterosexual, and being Black, in this case through the avatar of the Haitian is discrimination or discriminatory from being American. These are mutually exclusive categories. You simply can't be Black and American because there's no visible way to tell if a Black person is Haitian or not. That's why they thought that guy holding geese was Haitian at that one of those first pictures. Like, there's no visible way. So this is exactly how it becomes a way for people to just express their anti-Blackness.
Well, that's
you don't think conservatives know? I mean, you don't think for the conservatives, Haitians, Ethiopians, they all have some sort of aura about them. They just naturally know. They're very in tune with culture, so they know.
I don't deny that if you gave JD Vance a set of calipers and you put 5 Black people in front of him, that he could tell you exactly from what region they came from with a series of skull measurements. I don't deny that. I'm just saying that without those sophisticated, tools,
well, he doesn't have the ability to bring out the cranium measuring tool from a photograph. He would need like a 3D model.
I don't know. AI, Silicon Valley is all over this actually now, just trying to take accurate brain measurements from at least 3 photos from different angles. You can get all the phenomena of, what is it?
Phrenology.
JD Vance runs the photos through ChatGPT and asks them what region are they from based on their skull measurements.
Yeah, it's like an app. It's like an app called Skull Shape, but there has no vowels in it, so it's just like SK.
Scale.
Gosh, Peter I love Thiel innovation.
Right.
Peter Thiel has totally funded it.
interesting how, his explanation of why he'll continue calling them illegal, because he doesn't agree with the law, and because someone he doesn't like carried out that law. How far back do we do that? Do we extend that to the president before that? Do we extend that to the new immigration law before that? Can we keep going far enough back until it affects his wife's parents, or do they not count? How far back do we go? Because I'm interested to know when J.D. Vance claims it becomes legal and he won't argue with it. I'm going to assume it's somewhere after when his wife's parents came.
Yeah, or they don't count in the same way that abortion restrictions, at the end of the day, if someone close to you needs an abortion, J.D. Vance is a very rich guy, so it doesn't really matter. He fundamentally understands that he won't be affected by it. And he's been confronted multiple times about this hypocrisy, that his wife is an Indian American, that her parents are Indian immigrants, and he doesn't care because it's that cynical at the end of the day.
Chris Rufo was apparently undocumented.
Ooh. Interesting.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I mean, but this is a common thing amongst, conservatives or people who lean conservatively, not just on immigration, but a host of issues like abortion. Like, even if you don't find yourself insulated by wealth, everybody, generally speaking, who doesn't identify as an out and out racist knows people of color at this point in America. It's very hard to be in a totally monochromatic community. To some people's disappointment, it is. And so everyone has that one person, whether it's their friend at work or like their gardener in a lot of cases with some of these rich people, who they imagine will be an exception to the rule. They imagine that, like, obviously the law doesn't just work indiscriminately and, even the good ones get deported, but they don't understand that that's just not the way it's written, and it's not the way it will be enacted by like the ethno-fascist GOP. But that's how it gets past a lot of people and how they can see themselves voting for it, because they just think, oh, well, surely it's not the good ones. It's the one who commit criminals. It's like the rapists and stuff like that. It's not like my friend Manuel.
Right. Exactly. Now that we're here, let's turn to Matt Walsh on with Ryan Grimm here, which is the show Counterpoints, hosted by our friend of the show and friend Ryan Grimm and Emily Jashinsky. I guess she's the conservative on the panel, right? So they had Matt Walsh on to talk about the, again, racist neo-Nazi originated conspiracy theory about Haitian migrants eating pets.
Walsh has a new book out, or a new movie.
Oh yeah, right, about Am I a Racist or whatever it's called.
That apparently the media is too afraid to touch, despite
that. Yeah, that was his spin, but if you really read each one of those tweets, he went through the list of outlets they reached out to and complained about how each one turned down reviewing the movie.
Well,
I don't think it was well marketed, to be honest. Like, this is one of the first times I'm hearing about it.
Well, that's what he was trying to do by going undercover on the floor of the DNC in that stupid wig. I mean, he loves a chance to put long hair on, much like Steven Crowder. They love long wigs. It's just such a wonderful experience for them.
He uses the same disguise, not just in public, but in all his movies. It's like that long-haired wig. Sometimes he's a hippie. Sometimes he's just like a liberal teacher who, like in Lady Ballers. But it's like the same disguise.
I know.
Maybe they long to be metalheads, Emma. Have you ever thought of that? They just can't live out their metal dreams, so they have to wear the wig.
I haven't considered that, but speaking of metal, Ryan Grimm took a metal chair to his argument here. Like, this is part of why he's not a serious person, and there's so many reasons for it, but he got clocked by Joe Rogan on his trans documentary, where he said there were millions of kids undergoing gender-affirming care, and Rogan found out and did research in real time, unintentionally. Jamie looked this up, and it was like in the low thousands. So he's a professional liar, propagandist, all of this. This is his latest iteration, and look at how ignorant he is about just the history of Haiti. Ryan takes him to school.
Nobody thinks that it will benefit America to become more like Haiti. Nobody thinks that. Or I would challenge anyone, if they do think that, to explain how that's the case. Like, in what way could this country be improved by making it more like Haiti? When you look at Haiti, what part of Haiti are you saying to yourself, we need more of that?
Beaches.
Well, we have more beaches than them too, right? Don't we?
Right.
We're a much bigger country.
We don't want a marine invasion and occupation of the United States that constantly decapitates governments and takes the money out of the country and
Yeah,
saddles us with
We don't want the Clintons
debt from
either.
a revolution. Yeah,
Jasinski's got it.
Right. Although I don't. So you're saying that
we wouldn't want to be like basically a colony that the entire West spends 200 years punishing after the Haitian Revolution.
I get that, but I understand that, but also at a certain
we wouldn't want that. No, yes,
we wouldn't want that. But I would also say that that's not entirely why Haiti's in the position that it's in. I mean, at a certain point, as a country, you have to stand on your own 2 feet and take care of yourself. And
but at what point is that? They elect Aristide and we overthrow Aristide. Then they elect Jovenel Moïse. Jovenel Moïse is assassinated a bunch of
Pause it.
people.
Sorry, I hate to. Grimm's doing such a good job here, but I just want to reinsert what I just said about we don't have to go back far. We can go back to the Obama administration. Matt Walsh, what do you think about that administration?
Even Emily points it out as a conservative.
Yeah, the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation, putting the Haynes Levi Strauss minimum wage for textile production aside, you still have the botched response by the Clinton Foundation after the hurricane earthquake in 2010.
Yes.
Which was a notoriously failed too, which played a lot in 2016. Well, I mean, not as much as we wanted it to, but which I was paying attention to.
Yes, yeah, right. And also, Matt Walsh doesn't even know what he's talking about there. He's completely on the back foot. But when he refers to the Haitian Revolution, that's a part of it too. The racism that conservatives reflexively have towards Haitian people is just that. But for conservatives that actually know the history, and Matt Walsh clearly isn't one of them, a lot of their resentment towards Haiti is what Ryan describes, is the fact that Haiti successfully had a slave revolt. And Haiti has been paying for that with reverse reparations for centuries. Reverse reparations because of the loss of capital from the slave owners in France. That's part of why Haiti is in the situation and that it is in terms of political and economic turmoil, and the privatization disaster capitalists that have come in, aided by NGOs like the Clinton Foundation and other organizations. And so that's what Ryan is alluding to. But Matt Walsh isn't even a well-researched racist here.
He's out of his depth.
Yeah.
At what point is that they elect Aristide and we overthrow Aristide? Then they elect Jovenel Moïse. Jovenel Moïse is assassinated a bunch of people with American connections, and then we install in 2021, the United States installed the prime minister that we just ousted. So we could say, okay, yeah, you got to get over the 200 years ago, but we're still doing it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not in favor of. I'm very non-interventionist in my policies, so I'm not in favor of most of the things that we're doing in other countries.
We just made the new government in Haiti in a hotel room in Jamaica, and then we insisted that whatever government we made in Jamaica had to allow Kenyan troops to come in under the flag of the UN in order to go to war with the gangs.
Yeah, I'm not interested in. Right. If it were up to me, I'm not interested in doing anything in Haiti. Let Haiti be Haiti and take care of them. That's sort of my whole point here.
Oh.
Let them take care of themselves and their own problems. I'm also not saying that there's never a scenario where we let someone from Haiti into the country. But it doesn't have to just be about Haiti. But when you're throwing open the gates and just inviting anyone, in particular, the third world.
I guess your assumption there was that it is Haitian people that are creating the conditions on Haiti, and that if the Haitian people come to Springfield, they will recreate the conditions
but I don't think
in Haiti in Springfield, whereas what I'm saying is that it's actually the U.S. that has largely...
Oh, wow.
Check out Drop Site. Check out Ryan's work everywhere. But yeah, I mean, the United States violently occupied Haiti.
I'm so against intervention, I don't even really know about it.
Right.
I'm against learning about it, being aware of it as the context that sets the conversations I'm having.
Into the 20th century, the United States was occupying Haiti. Go on, Brandon. Sorry.
I'm so against intervention. I'm not going to intervene in my own stupidity. I'm
so against intervention, you guys.
I'm taking a neutral position.
The main part of intervention that he seems to be against, though, is the small part where America takes responsibility for the innocent people who are caught up in this, and we bring them here so they can live ostensibly a better life than under the conditions that we put the country of Haiti in.
I'm actually surprised he didn't have a better answer to that, because this is not the first time Republicans or far right commentators have been confronted by like, hey, a lot of the countries that you're saying people are coming from, it's because America's like conducting a drug war there, or because we did a coup, or because we're like exploiting them and all of their natural
use this
resources.
against, just to buttress your point quickly, Brandon, they use this against Biden because of the Afghan parolee problem, right? Or the Afghan parolee initiative, right?
Yeah, and I mean, usually the response is just like, "Who cares? You're saying that like they're weak country, blah blah blah." So it's just weird that he didn't even go that far. He just seemed almost shocked by the fact that this is happening. It's shows his ignorance.
I think that ignorance is exactly right. I think they legit think when people say, "Well, look, this is what America did 20 years ago." 5 years ago, 50 years ago. I think they literally think that is like some kind of fallacy.
No, they think it's whining.
To historicize. Yeah, it's like this is some sort of woke hand waving when it's actually just historically situating the problem that we're trying to fucking address.
But the entire all of conservatism is based on no understanding of history. I mean, like, I guess this is kind of a point that we've made many times. It's nothing new, but if you learn history, it's quite clear when patterns emerge.
It's myth versus history.
It demystifies things like, American exceptionalism, or what capitalism really means in the context of the global South, or
I think that's definitely a huge part of it. But another part of it is they really do view history as like this thing in the past that has no relation to current day.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
They view the event that some of them will understand the event. The wrongdoing to a group of people. You could use any single one against any sort of marginalized group throughout history.
The atom bomb.
They'll understand. They'll understand that happened, and some of them might even view that as bad and wrong, but they do not understand the reverberations that one event causes, and sometimes there are multiple events that come after it. They just don't understand all of that. They just get that one big mainstream event they learned about in like elementary school, and then they do not understand or comprehend the effects that event causes in the decades or even longer.
They may though understand it in the sense of like they don't even understand if they were placed in that historical period that they would be the villains. That's like in part the issue in that situation. They struggle with object permanence or like historical permanence, right? In the sense that they view things as what they see in front of them in terms of time.
Well, yeah.
But I also think like, they don't want to grapple with history because that would contextualize the positions that they have in this current moment, right? And so that is a lack of intellectual curiosity that also just protects themselves.
Well, yeah, I think that's because a lot of them also don't like, what Matt is saying is very true. I think the way we teach history in this country, especially at the high school level, oftentimes like teaches history as like discrete events, but also just the way like right wingers think about stuff is like a very reactionary way of thinking. They try to work through everything, every phenomenon that they see in the real world from what they presume to be first principles, just like their senses, what they can see in front of them, what they can interpret, like based on an underlying set of facts that they learned in like high school. And also they don't acknowledge any kind of subconscious biases that they might have, either based on the context that they're raised within too, like Matt is kind of saying. And so a lot of times they just work from a very American chauvinist opinion of the world. They work from a very like misinformed opinion of science, and they try to suss everything out like with their own brain without trying to learn anything from other people.
And they naturalize everything, right? So they naturalize every existing hierarchy, and they naturalize the existing way of the world.
And that's what makes it really susceptible to anti-immigration stuff, because a lot of them are prone to like correlation fallacies where they see two things happening at the same time, or like they perceive or acknowledge two things happening at the same time. And so they assume they have to be related directly as opposed to like having intervening variables. So a lot of that, you see that happening in the 90s and like these anti-immigration witch hunts where it's like, oh, I'm noticing my standard of living decrease. At the same time, there are more Haitians in my community. Those two things must be because the influx of Haitians is causing my standard of living to decrease. And it's like, no, neoliberal politics, neoconservative politics are causing everyone's standard of living to decrease further and worse, and in the global South, specifically Haiti. And that's what's causing a lot of migration, and it's also impacting you. So people have a hard time making those like determinations.
And it's pumping JD Vance to the vice presidency of the ticket, because all that money that should have gone back to like let people in the Rust Belt stay in their homes and the rest of the country went into Silicon Valley so they could make commercial spyware disguised as social media and AI to try to replace labor and cryptocurrency, because we need to find a way to make magic money out of thin air, even more so than was done during the sort of post-financial crisis era.
I will say just one last thing, and this is why it's also important to like learn about Cuba in contrast with Haiti, and because for all the demonization that Cuba gets from our government, from like right wingers, from just like the United States in general, you can see two divergent pathways when it comes to colonization in both Cuba and Haiti. And as bad as Cuba is, you know, the exclusion of neoliberalism as part of their country has left them in a radically better place than Haiti.
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. All right, guys, I'm going to open up the phone line. Sorry, a little later today. 646-257-3920. Caroline and Jeff, are you saying they don't take personal responsibility for their ideas? Curious.
No, they're just musing. They're not. They're just musing.
Yeah. WTF, Cody. Even the preacher is trying to not understand history. We have tried teaching only celibacy in schools. We have tried religion to deter sex. It does not work.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this stuff is literally just new formations of things like the Scopes monkey trial or Jim Crow.
Caroline and Jeff says, I disagree, Matt, that they don't think that. They think that Haiti or Venezuela deserved it. I think Matt Binder is what.
No, that's. I mean, some of them certainly do. That's for sure. I would say there's a, you know, it's a both. There's people both. I mean, it's not only just conservatives either, but it does seem to be a phenomena that affects many conservatives.
Walsh, if he wasn't sitting across from a more alpha male specimen such as Ryan Grimm, would have also said, Haiti should just toughen up a little bit, but he knew that he wasn't in a position to do that.
It's fun to have Ryan and his Chad ways on our side.
Yeah. I think he's just used to dealing with like high schoolers, because, you know, Matt Walsh is always going to like a college and trying to pick on like young LGBTQ students. So I think the level of feedback he's expecting is like, that's racist. How can you say that? And then you go like, okay, but let's situate this in the political and historical climate of Haiti. And you can tell me how you disagree that these events affected the way they live. And he's just like, I've never heard of this before.
Now
maybe if he was wearing a costume, he would have felt more comfortable.
Here's what we're going to do is I'm going to say several proper nouns. You aren't going to be able to identify any of them, and we're going to move on from this topic.
JR and Philly, as usual, Brandon is 100% correct. There's actual support in neurology and behavioral science research that basically shows that people's hostility towards the other is lessened by having superficial knowledge about them as individuals. Clue Pack. The Animation Guild, IATSE 839, has resumed negotiations with the AMPTP Studios after a month-long hiatus this week. We're hurting and fighting for a fair contract. May I request a shofar for the wonderful negotiators working day and night on behalf of the workers that bring these idiots to life and to screens worldwide. Thank you, Matt. Matt is making the trip over to Sam's soundboard, and we are a go. Thank you very much. I was told last week by Sam that I have a soundboard that's already purchased, but we have not installed said soundboard. This is what's
probably in the giant pile of electronic equipment on the couch.
Yep. Yeah. Maybe we'll get that done in like a year or something like that.
Yeah. Maybe he'll install it like
for the midterms 2026.
Dave from Jamaica. Remember JD Vance fans, all 10 of them, justifying his wife, saying she's of an Aryan cast. Oh, God.
Hey, boy.
Crunchy, I worry that we are underestimating how much people love being afraid of immigrants. Certainly, it's a suburban moral panic for sure.
I mean, it's definitely important to be on guard against it, but it's also important not to assume that everybody is a giant racist, because I think most people actually aren't.
I also think you have to accept that, like, there's no way to tell who is an immigrant, like, really, like the way that they mean, like an illegal immigrant, someone who's in this country illegally. This is like a construct that people are being made to be afraid of. This is like a moral panic that has been, a large part of American history for a decent part of it. But the other in this case has always shifted to mirror different kinds of cultural anxieties that we're having in our society. And so I think it's hard to imagine that if Americans were generally being taken care of by their government in a way that was, corrected for the maldistribution of resources we currently see, and weren't being fed a constant stream of anti-immigrant and anti-brown people propaganda, that they would hate Latinos. Because when people talk about immigrants, no one ever mentions like all of the people, the illegal Irish immigrants that are always living here. And then every so often, like, I don't know if I say INS, but ICE will do a sweep of like Boston, and they'll like export or deport to like 20,000 Irish illegal immigrants in the country. And people will be like, oh, I forgot that this also applies to like white people. So we have to understand that like the illegal immigrant construct is one that is like not just about people who are not American in the bureaucratic sense, but also people who don't represent what America wants itself to look like in the literal sense. So we can't be anti-immigrant without being like specifically anti-brown and pro-white.
Yeah, right. Calling from an 859 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Kimmy from Kentucky.
Kimmy from Kentucky. What's on your mind?
So I've been kind of wanting to call in a few times, and I called in earlier about J.D. Vance, but something keeps coming up about a subject, and someone actually called in last week about it, and I want to thank Matt, I think, for speaking up a little bit about it. But it's addressing the issue of kind of, I don't want to say writing off, but devaluing people who don't have college degrees, especially being from Appalachia. I'm from a town of like less than 2,000, or a county less than 2,000 people. And I moved off, and I got to see the big city, but not everybody gets to do that, and there were things in my life that did not lead to a college degree, but I worked my butt off, and now I get to work in policy, actually, in advocacy, and I help farmers, and I've taken farmers to D.C. and to the Capitol, to our state house. I love Andy Beshear, and that just brings me to just the whole misconception of Kentucky and writing us off for I don't want to say for so long,
right,
but we're very much overlooked. And I feel like this is just from my perspective of being on the ground and growing up here, is the solution to get them to vote Democrat is so clear. And it just feels like is everyone just overlooking it, or, and it's simply...
No, I mean, sorry to jump in, but this is what I was trying to get into with the Teamsters thing, which is the Teamsters have a large amount of people who aren't college educated. And that is a type of a voter that the Democrats have consciously, and they wrote this in the 80s, turned their back on. They did. That was a plan. That's why it's tough. That's why, like, one nice pro-labor presidency by Biden, even if we ignore the disagreements over the rail strike, is not fucking enough sometimes. Like, and I think it's really a big problem that progressives, in fact, a lot of people that listen to this show are saying it must be just simply bigotry. Like, I'm not here to flatter this false consciousness to think Trump can be pro-labor. I think it's fucking stupid. But I also know that problem isn't a result of labor. That's a problem of one of the major parties in America deciding we don't need those fucking people. We want college-educated people from the suburbs.
Yeah, and I think, just really quickly to add to Matt's point, unfortunately, the Kamala Harris campaign has not represented in any way a departure from that posture. I would argue that she's run in a direction that's fortified it, because that's kind of the class that the Democratic Party serves, the more, again, managerial, college educated versus just the kind of rank capitalism that the Republicans represent. It's still, that's why the Democrats are insufficient in this way, and it's going to take many years to disentangle.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing is also people, like, with writing these people off and thinking they don't understand or they're stupid. And my mom always said there's a difference between stupid and ignorant, and it's true. And people, I mean, Kentucky has, since 1930, has only had 4 Republican governors, and none of them were ever reelected for another term, including Matt Bevin. We have a county, Elliott County, who has voted Democrat for the last 144 years. I mean, we started the coal miner labor movement. I mean, we provided, we're like one of the top beef and poultry producers on this side of Mississippi. Like, we matter, and I think that's why that's not what they're understanding is all the stuff that happened with the New Deal and the TVA and the Farm Bill, which is super important. All of that stuff started fading off, and you can't see those impacts anymore in our younger generations. So they're looking for something, and that's like the whole coal mining thing. People that also makes me angry because people want to talk for these coal miners and say that they want coal to come back, and that's like asking if you want to go back and live with your abuser. Why would you want to go back into a coal mine to die for somebody else? Why would you want your family member to get black lung? Why would you want to basically live in poverty still, even though it's a good job? You're still in the hills of Appalachia, and you have no other resources around you besides going into the mines. So people there want a different option.
Well,
like, we'd
exactly.
like a different option, please.
Well, and that's the thing is like, it's been a frustrating month of the Kamala Harris campaign in that regard. I had a lot of hope because I thought the Tim Walz pick was pretty inspired, and I thought that would be more of an orientation. But
Walz is a direction that would address some of this. I think.
So there's some positives, but I would say that the way that the campaign has been oriented, the persistent focus on middle class, is designed to run up the numbers with a specific demographic, to Matt's point. And I wish that there was more thoughtfulness about the long-term implications of that, even if the Democrats are more pro-worker in what they support than the Republicans. There's no question. The way the campaign is running, to your point, there's a messaging issue. And it feels condescending and wrong, and like they're leaving behind huge swaths of the country for an extremely safe electoral approach.
Yeah, for sure. And just another little example of like how the difference between ignorant, stupid, and understanding the issues even here is like the farmer down in eastern Kentucky. Not only did the floods absolutely take out everything that they ever owned, but took out more than 100 years of topsoil. So, I mean, do you think he doesn't understand not only the implications of climate change, but natural disasters and our response as the government to that? And then the women, the girls that I graduated high school with, they wouldn't go off to college because they had to stay home and be a primary caretaker for someone. Mm-hmm. And you can't tell me that those people know more about Medicaid and Medicare and helping people get signed up and the ins and outs of those things than anybody I ever met at an office who has a college degree. They don't want to sit down with somebody in poverty or homeless or houseless. They're just looked down upon, and
it's a problem in the cities.
She understands the issue
too. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So no, it's okay. I've just been really frustrated about it because I feel like, and I don't want to give the illusion that I have this huge hope that Kentucky can turn blue tomorrow. I don't believe that because the Republican takeover took years and years. Like I said, we were Democrat, but there's theories that I have of what happened here. But a lot of it has to do with religion and implications of putting in layman ministers instead of having educated ministers and priests. But things like that. And yeah, I just feel like we're being written off when there are clear, open possibilities. And I mean, we have Andy Bashir as our governor, and everybody's like, that's so weird. And it's like, no, not really. Like, he listens to us. He's given us jobs. He talks to us like we're human beings. And we see our results at home. That's literally all we want. And it's so crazy that all these people on CNN and they're like, it's so weird that they vote Andy Bashir in.
And his popularity is like record high, not record high, but definitely one of the highest in the country for a governor. In a red state with a legislature that tries to sabotage him at every turn. Gonna let you go in a second, Kimmy, but I really appreciate your call, and I'll also say, just to add to what you're saying, this is why just saying like I love fracking now, and like running away from the good elements of the jobs part of the Green New Deal is not a good idea, because that could be making that she could be making that case, but it doesn't mean it won't happen if she's president. But the campaign strategy, I think, makes total sense. Why you're like, this is not speaking to me or people I know.
Yes, yes, for sure. But
appreciate the call.
Thank you all for taking my call. Yeah, left is best, and I love leftist mafia. And Emma, I share your absolute hatred for Taylor Swift.
Kimmy, you might be my favorite caller of all time. Thanks so much.
Every time you say it, I'm like, yes, go harder, but
don't
tell her that.
Don't tell me. It's gonna ruin my career. The Swifties don't play. All right.
I know.
Have a good one.
Y'all.
Thanks.
Diplomacy.
Bye.
Bye.
I mean, we gotta be lucky that I'm assuming our audience skews like 25 plus, because otherwise we'd be receiving hundreds of hate emails per day over your stance on Taylor Swift.
They're gonna hack our.
I feel like
I know.
I feel like a lot of Taylor Swift fans are 25 plus. I feel like her fans.
That's true too. Yeah, I'm just
been
I'm
around
thinking
for a
like the
long time.
hardcore ones that would like jump in front of a bullet for her.
No, it's just it's. There are a lot of all right.
We don't have to discuss it.
We don't have to discuss it. I'm about to say something mean about.
I don't know anything about Taylor Swift. I don't know anything about her. I don't know a single Taylor Swift song, except for whatever
she grew up on a
like
Christmas tree farm.
I know that part. I know she has like her like Lifetime ass movie background, but like the only Taylor Swift times I've heard her songs are when like I'm in an Old Navy and they're like just pumping it through like the speakers.
Yeah. She's a billionaire. I don't need to read about her like I'm reading the New York Times Siena poll. I don't need to read what's Taylor Swift's effect on the election. Oh, not at all. Oh, well, good. We spent like an entire media cycle on this. Amazing.
A bunch of people got clicks.
I gotta move on. All right. Okay. Calling from a 516 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
Hi, this is M from Florida.
Sorry?
This is M from Florida.
M from Florida. What's on your mind?
Yeah. It's old news by now, but I have some info on the Tim Pool Russia thing.
Interesting.
So, first off, I don't know if you realize this. Before the deal he did with Tenet, the Culture War podcast was just an interview show, and the one you were on was the first time Tim switched it to a debate format.
Can you say it again?
It's just kind of interesting.
Emma did notice the debate change, the format change, right? It went to like a debate after being like a hangout with beanbag chairs and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was on the current, and I just thought that he didn't want to debate me on. He brought in backup.
Beanbag chairs.
Yeah,
still didn't go that great for him.
Yeah, but the next one was like half conservatives gone woke, and most of them were only on Tenet Media. But I look back, most of them are like, is civil war imminent? Why is the West falling?
Interesting.
stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and he started that summer talking more about Ukraine and brought on people like Max Blumenthal and Jackson Hinkle as his whole Russia-Ukraine experts.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I said this on air before, but when I was leaving the compound, it was pouring rain. Part of why I didn't, take him up on the offer of the tour. And some of the guys working there were joking around outside, and they were the joke was they were putting a Ukrainian bumper sticker on one of the other guys' cars. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't identify, but two of the white guys working on the compound. So it's real fun.
Don't know that narrows it down.
Yeah.
Well, the editor-in-chief of his website used to work for Sputnik, so
interesting.
So now my guess is he doesn't care whether or not his stuff works for the interests of Russia.
Yeah, he's in there for the profit.
Maybe I don't even know if he probably didn't care enough to be aware of it, and he's an idiot, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like even if he had an awareness of it, what would his interpretation be?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was working on a short-lived podcast about him at the time, so I was paying attention, and when he was mad at Bellingcat for exposing that mass shooter dipshit as a fan of his, he took a tweet from Ian Miles Chong, who was at the time at least big on the pro-Russia Ukraine, saying Bellingcat with the CIA cut out PSYOP, which, was originally came from the Kremlin back in 2012 when Bellingcat was, against their interests.
Okay. Well, I don't know about that last part, but appreciate the call. Thanks for the info. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye. Michigan marks his very interesting interviews today. Speaking of blowback from sabotage peace talks, The Intercept just released an investigative report saying that in April 2022, Russia and Ukraine had agreed on a proposed ceasefire, but the Biden administration and the UK government worked to sabotage that deal and prolong the conflict. When Bernie Sanders' foreign policy advisor, Matt Duss, was on the Majority Report, he totally rejected this narrative as Russian propaganda. Who should we believe, Matt Duss or The Intercept?
Remind me the narratives?
The Intercept had a report that in April 2022, Russia and Ukraine had agreed on a proposed ceasefire, but Biden and the UK government worked to sabotage it. I'd heard that reported other places. I mean,
yeah, I think that's plausible.
Also,
I think Duss is fine, but I don't take him as just the arbiter of all truths. He's playing politics. In
no,
DC.
yeah, he has a think tank, and Duss is. I really like his work a lot, and he's there need to be more Matt Dusses in Washington in a space that's run by a lot of psychos who don't have his politics. But I would say that also Matt was on before we got that information, so I don't think I could say who do we believe, Matt Duss or The Intercept. I need to read that report, but I have no reason to doubt it. I would think that and we said it at the time, there were forces, Hillary Clinton went on after Russia invaded on television to say that this is a great opportunity to weaken Vladimir Putin, and I would not be shocked if there were terms that the Biden administration thought didn't sufficiently do that. And yeah.
Boris Johnson too.
And Boris Johnson, yeah, right. Scoot from Denver. I love how the entire media reaction to the second Trump assassination attempt is, we don't have to discuss it. Okay. Vinny P. Federal jobs guarantee would solve so much. Yeah.
It wouldn't solve how to get people to work for capitalists, which is the #1 priority of the United States government for a long, long time.
Dread Pirate Robin says, I live in the same hometown as Mark Robinson and Ryan Routh. We're really making the map on crazy these days. So that's the guy who almost shot Trump.
I was gonna say who?
Oh, wow.
That's some content creator.
In a sense. Bingo Dango, plenty of conservatives claim Haitians genocided all white people in Haiti, so they basically are cursed forever for that. Of course, that isn't true at all. Yeah. Kowalski from Nebraska, Emma, please ask Binder if he's been working out his organized labor muscle. He has to convince his girl boss, Nancy Pelosi, by flexing his labor muscle on her.
Oh, boy. All right, that's an inside joke from the stream. We'll leave it there.
The Earl of Grey, I agree with Brandon about it being anti-black, but I think there's a double layer to it as well. They are also Hispanic. I think referring to Haitian migrants.
Yeah, although I think the anti-blackness is more relevant now, mainly because of who the Republicans are trying to make inroads with in certain communities.
Hank Aaron 715, Hassan showed a clip where Trump called out how the Clintons harmed Haiti on the debate stage, 2016. Wow.
That's right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I don't remember that at all.
So unfair what you did to those people making those jeans.
I think I just oh God, I have a hangnail. I think I just blocked out those debates, except for when Trump said did the mic drop because you'd be in jail moment. That's basically all. She was so bad. Say what we want about Kamala, but Jesus Christ, at least she knew how to nail this dude. And Hillary was going around trying to run as I don't even know what, a war hawk wonk or something like that. It was horrible. Election.
Unprovoked violence with the corrective here. Haitians are not Hispanic; they are Francophone.
Yeah, that's why I was a little.
They just happen to be on the same island as the Dominican Republic.
They are, yeah.
I think I just.
So there are some Sorry.
Go ahead.
There are some light-skinned Dominican-looking, Haitians. There's a wide spectrum of colors of Haitians. You see the darkest ones, the ones with the darkest skin tones in the news when people are trying to demonize them. But of course, Haitians can look like anything because you can be white and born in Haiti. You can be Asian and born in Haiti. That's why when, you talk about being anti-immigrant, it's important to understand that there's a very specific view of what an immigrant looks like that people are trying to weaponize. And this one just happens to be black immigrants. And, they're pushing it pretty hard. I don't think it's playing very well to most people, but they're definitely pushing it pretty hard.
I know we moved on from the JD Vance thing, but him saying that just allowing Haitians to seek opportunities in a state is intervention, foreign intervention somehow. That's like saying Hmong people who seek refuge from Laos because of what was going on in Vietnam. That's the intervention we're upset with, is that the demographic got threatened because they are white supremacists.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they see it as an invasion. They see it as a slow takeover, a slow colonization of the global north. And they don't even understand that the culture we have here is not being devalued by Haitian or, other types of migrants, but the culture that they see is just a mask for the capitalism that drives all of that stuff for most people now. And so their community is being ravaged by capitalism, and the influx of Haitians is just part of that picture that's being drawn. Not the apple pie on the windowsill that they think is missing. It's no, it's this slow degradation of their, of communities by capitalism, by post-industrial capitalism.
Yeah.
It is crazy to say that the problem in the Rust Belt is too many people immigrating.
Yeah.
Well, it's factually wrong, and even the Republican governor who, is contradicting it. But you just got to say, it's incredible that the Democrats just fell ass backwards into a sympathetic immigration narrative when they were just sprinting to the right on this. The Republican Trump just tripped over his own dick and said the most insane conspiracy theory ever on the debate stage, and now the Democrats are oh, we're more humane, but they didn't offer that before, and that's just kind of a metaphor for their.
But that's the problem is I don't feel like they. Maybe they make hay off of this or something. I don't know. The problem is that they've enabled this attack on Haitians by accepting all their premises on the border. Then the GOP has to be well, fine, we'll escalate outside the border. How about Illinois? not even close to a border.
Well, I mean, I think for the people who live there, and this is again an issue that dying small towns are having, it's a very powerful image of like, my kids are moving away because capitalists are extracting value not just from the global south to the global north, but from like periphery areas of the global north to like cosmopolitans, obviously, to New York, to Chicago. And so, my kid goes to college somewhere out of town or maybe in town, then he leaves, depending on what kind of job he wants. He just leaves and goes to Chicago. You know who takes my kid's place in this small town? A Haitian immigrant. And so it's irrational, but it's still born in something that they're like experiencing emotionally, which is the dying of small towns that's represented by like their children moving away and not been like, there's racist, but it's not getting at the heart of what their problem is, obviously. It's just weaponizing their like general being upset about their communities falling apart and their loss of family.
It's given them a pathology instead of a solution. And
exactly.
It destroys entire communities. I mean, Cairo, Illinois, I believe it's on the branching of the Mississippi and the Ohio River, but people can look that up, which is a very opportune place for a city to be. People might not understand why we don't know about Cairo, Illinois, is because it completely descended into like white supremacist Klan violence like 50 years ago.
Just saw the time, guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to turn off the phone lines. Going to read some IMs, and then we'll get out of here. Apologies. Marianne's DNC.
I'm sorry to talk over you, but I keep saying Springfield, Illinois. Cairo, Illinois is in Illinois, but Springfield, of course, Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah. Marianne's DNC plant says, first time using the app, not sure if this sent. It did. Please bring Shadow Network author Ann Nelson back on to discuss the Christian fundamentalism in the GOP. You have that, Bradley? Ann Nelson. Rainbow Panthers East Bay says, did y'all talk about the new emails out of Georgia? Lots of folks planning to question before a single vote is cast. It's official. Well, we've covered, I think I covered when Sam was out what was happening with the Georgia election boards, but not this recent news. No, I'm sorry, I haven't seen it.
One thing I would highlight about Georgia is worrying. Is that the ground game that had been so good in previous elections, Warnock, for instance, Ossoff, not there. And a big problem is because a lot of those people that would be knocking doors aren't supportive of the Cop City stuff that Democratic leadership has rammed down throats. So I hope that's not a problem.
Interestingly, the election lawyer that Harris hired back after Biden fired him for being too aggressive combating Republicans was the guy that stood up for the Cop City protesters and said that their suppression of the ballot initiative was illegal. So, I don't know. But
that's good.
Screw Democrats in Georgia. Yeah. But yeah, maybe they could do some work on that.
Maybe don't piss into the tent of the people that you expect to knock doors on you. But hopefully you can win Michigan and Georgia.
Yeah.
I think the Mark Robinson news has been sort of slowly rolled out.
Can you tell us what it is?
Well, I'm afraid that it's not the case, but let me see who this person is reporting it. This person has.
I saw an IM, but I didn't wanna say it either. So, are you seeing?
I'm seeing.
What can you do with this information?
Yeah.
Whether or not it's true is not what matters.
Well,
though it does play a role.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I will say that I'm seeing, and current reporter from Zedio News report that apparently Mark Robinson referred to himself as a black Nazi.
That's
and
what I saw
was
too.
smearing MLK and making anti-Semitic comments. Now, I'm surprised actually that this is enough to get you pressured off a ticket by the GOP.
Is this redundant?
This is exactly what he's been like the entire time.
But I guess it also got Kanye off of Adidas. So,
that's true.
If it's enough for Kanye, it's certainly enough for Mark Robinson. He doesn't even have bars, as we saw earlier.
Oh wait, yeah. So it is. I think the final thing, given what's going on in Israel, might be the issue. The main ones I remember were that they alleging him to make some extremely racist comments about Martin Luther King, referred to himself as a black Nazi, and used anti-Semitic language referring to Jews. So.
Okay, so this is everything we already knew. Anyway.
Oh yeah, he's already done the Holocaust denial thing. None of this is new.
Yeah.
Well, was it soft denial? And because this is hard denial.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying, people make it. People.
I'm a little disappointed because I just feel like we were gonna get something. Yeah, I mean, we'll look into it, I guess.
I'm glad there's not video. I'm frankly relieved.
Yeah. WTF? I already read that one. Emma and the Jet says the U.S. Marines went into a bank at Port-au-Prince and stole half the Haitian gold reserves. Yeah. Charlie She Her, as a shout out, Rebecca Azor put out a video on the lies that Haitians are dealing with right now. Recommended for anyone who wants to hear from a Haitian American perspective. JR in Philly, check out Robert Sapolsky's work on the subject. It's pretty depressing stuff. All right, 3 more. Greg from Arkansas. So if someone makes a new law that JD Vance doesn't like, is it actually an illegal law and therefore doesn't count? What a dum-dum. Shrimp-O-Maniac. From a campaign consultant for Robinson via Business NC about the allegations in the story. The main one I remember they were alleging... Okay, right, yeah, we just read that. We just figured that out.
It's a little boring.
I know. Brock from VA. The response I've seen from the far right on Twitter regarding Haiti after the slave revolt is they did a white genocide during the revolt because they are savages, and that's why the country has been a shithole ever since. They sympathize with the slavers and not the slaves because they take the lessons they want from historical stories. And the final...
Imagine putting yourself in history and sympathizing with the Haitian slave owners. That's a big L. I'm sorry. You're wasting your life using your imagination on that shit.
Exactly. And the final IM of the day, Matt from Alberta. I was over at my grandma's house this week helping out with general chores. Good job, grandson. There was an entire section on her bookshelf dedicated to just Glenn Beck stuff and conspiracy stuff. My family is LDS, so they're very into John Birch Society stuff. Then fixed her computer, and while Googling around for stuff, all I could see in her search history was just the farthest right-wing stuff I could find. Every time I go over, I have to push back on something. Thank you for the talking points. Well, hope they're working. Sorry
doing your part.
You're doing your part. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. Thanks so much. Thanks, Binder. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Matt and Bradley. We will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made.